Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and all the participants from ASEAN and Korea. Welcome to the Korea and ASEAN webinar on the responses from higher education to global pandemic in 2020. My name is Mina Park, Director of Korean Council for University Education. And since Corona pandemic was declared last year, it has been almost a year. And during almost 1 year, the world has fallen into chaos, and so did higher education institutions. Students could not go to school, and classes had to transit to online. But however, all the members from ASEAN and Korea have gathered to overcome this situation. Governments, universities, and students have raised various opinions to protect learners' rights of study and secure the quality of education despite the pandemic. To overcome this situation, we put all the efforts to prevent infection to universities and communities. The most important thing to remember is that we did not stop discussion and mutual cooperation to overcome this situation. And this is why we organized this webinar among Korea and ASEAN. So KCUE and ASEAN University Network and ASEAN Credit Transfer System have gathered to organize this webinar to share policies and good practices from universities to respond to the pandemic. And we are also going to listen to international students under the pandemic. And now let's get started our webinar today. And first, I'd like to invite our distinguished guests from Korea and ASEAN, and they will deliver the opening remarks. And first, I'd like to introduce the Chairman Dr.Incheol from Korean Council for University Education. And Chairman Kim.
Well, good morning, everyone. Actually, good afternoon, distinguished guest. My name is Dr.Incheol, Chairperson of Korean Council for University Education, or KCUE. And I'm also working for the University of, Hankuk University of Foreign Studies as president. And my university is located about 20 minutes away from this hotel, northeastern part of Seoul, whereas the other office for KCUE is located far east Seoul area. So two offices are very much too much separated each other. So it's very tough to commute. So in any event, it's so nice to see you, everyone, even though this meeting is online, but I have to read what I have prepared. So please allow me to do. On behalf of Korean Council for University Education, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to all participants in Korea-ASEAN webinar, an online seminar. KCUE is an institution representing higher education in Korea and has served as an international partner in the field of higher education with Korean Ministry of Education. Higher education has undergone a significant transformation amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. The challenges in education caused by COVID-19 are expected to be more than temporary. And now, education is paving a new path. Universities, governments, and students should build this new path together. Last year, after the onset on the pandemic, government and students and universities in Korea and ASEAN have made various efforts to cope with this challenge, and we have glimpsed an opportunity. There have been success stories. I believe that sharing those best practices by universities and policy directions will contribute to improving the quality of higher education in this region in the future. With this in mind, the Korean Council for University Education and the ASEAN University Network jointly prepared for the Korean-ASEAN online seminar titled as Response from Higher Education to Global Pandemic. Through this forum, we hope to listen to the voices of various stakeholders in higher education in response to COVID-19. Universities should take the initiative and actively transform their curriculums according to the changes of the times. Governments should grant universities the autonomy to actively respond to these changes. The government's cooperation and support are essential to meet the diverse educational needs of students. Students should listen to the effort of the government and universities and suggest ways to improve them. All these stakeholders' voices should be carefully incorporated into policies. More specifically, I think we can promote reciprocal development of the region by ensuring a range of countries and cultures solve multi-faceted problems together. If we successfully exchange and cooperate together in this way, diversity in higher education will be enhanced. If education does not prepare for the future, it will be difficult to imagine a prosperous future for the country and the region. Let us prepare for the future together through this forum. So, thank you very much, and good afternoon.
Thank you, Chairman Kim. And now, next, I'd like our second opening I'd like to invite Dr. Choltis Dhirathiti, the Executive Director from ASEAN University Network. Dr. Dhirathiti.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Choi Eng here, Director General, International Cooperation Bureau, Korea Ministry of Education. His Excellency Kun Fok, Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN Secretariat for ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community, Professor Aldrin Darilak, Commissioner from the Commission on Higher Education, the Philippines, Dr. Incheol Kim, Chairperson of Korean Council for University Education, distinguished speakers, moderators, resource persons, online participants, and also to those watch later viewers of this webinar. Good afternoon, and for some part also good morning. It has been roughly 1 full year since our Southeast and East Asian regions have entered all sorts of travel restrictions and lockdowns. 1 year is quite enough, not too long or not too short, for reviewing and reaching certain conclusions regarding the lessons learned so far from the common experiences. I was very glad that the Korea Council for University Education, or KCUE, Republic of Korea, took the initiative in organizing today's webinar. And thank you so very much for inviting the ASEAN University Network Secretariat, together with the AUN Thematic Network on ASEAN Credit Transfer System, to co-host this event. Terrible setbacks have been inflicted during the past 1 year by the pandemic upon the whole student exchange activities and cross-border youth programs and projects. What can we do? There's nothing that we would not do, but at this present time, there's one important contribution we can make when we are gathering in the setting like this webinar, which is to share your experiences and good practices. And many of us here, I believe, will carry the lessons learned further into the practical steps ahead. So I look forward to hearing from you all. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Dr. Dhirathiti, for your opening remark. Now, I'd like to invite our two distinguished guests for welcoming remarks. And first, I'd like to introduce Ms. Choi Eun-hee for first welcoming remark. She is the Director General of International Cooperation Bureau, Korea Ministry of Education. Please welcome Ms. Choi Eun-hee.
Good afternoon. I'm Choi Eun-hee, Director General of the International Cooperation Bureau of the Korea Ministry of Education. First, I would like to convey my deep gratitude to Chairman Dr.Incheol of the Korean Council for University Education and Executive Director Choltis Dhirathiti of the ASEAN University Network for their contribution in organizing today's forum. I also would like to thank Deputy Secretary General Kung Pok of the ASEAN Secretariat for his welcoming remarks, and Secretary General Hwang Hong-gyu of the Korean Council for University Education, and Chairman Jesus Lorenzo Mateo of the ASEANSOM-ED for giving keynote speeches. Last but not least, I want to welcome all panelists and participants to this valuable forum and look forward to your input. I'm glad that by taking this opportunity, we'll discuss our experiences of how we handled COVID-19 in higher education and our ways forward to promoting shared development. Korea and ASEAN joined forces for the past 3 decades in various spheres, including education. After establishing our strategic partnership, we have worked side by side more closely, which led to tangible outcomes. Although COVID-19 posed a threat to the prospect of international cooperation, it did not undermine our collective commitment to strong solidarity and partnership. The government of Korea and ASEAN countries introduced the special entry procedure to ensure that our people-to-people exchange continued. And at the same time, they ensured students' learning through distance education and flexible management of their academic programs. Also, our universities put their best efforts to protect the health and safety of our students with their preventative measures. Today, we will have a chance to share these experiences and best practices of how our higher education system had COVID-19 under control. It will not only help us overcome the current pandemic, but also lay the foundation for continued exchange and cooperation in the field of education for the post-COVID-19 era. Starting with this forum, I hope to have many more meaningful opportunities leading to facilitate the community of people-centered peace and prosperity that embraces all of Asia. I wish you good health and happiness. Thank you.
Thank you, Director General. Now, I'd like to introduce His Excellency Kung Pok for the second welcoming remark. He is the Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN Secretariat for ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community. Please welcome His Excellency.
Very much. Dr. Dr.Incheol, Chairperson of the Korean Council for University Education, Excellency Choi Eun-hee, Director General of the International Cooperation Bureau, Ministry of Education of the Republic of Korea, Dr. Adrin Darelak, Commissioner of the Commission on Higher Education in the Philippines, Dr. Choltis, Executive Director of the ASEAN University Network Secretariat, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon. It is my pleasure to be with you here today at the ASEAN Korea webinar on the responses from higher education to global pandemic. Allow me to thank the Korean Council for University Education, the AUN Secretariat, and the ASEAN Credit Transfer System Secretariat for the kind invitation for this webinar. There is no doubt that the ramification of COVID-19 on education are immense and will be felt for many major years. As with the rest of the education sector, the fallout from COVID-19 for higher education is dramatic. International student mobility has been disrupted due to widespread travel restriction and university closure. In our region, approximately 150 million learners have been affected as a result of localized closure of schools and other educational institutions. In November 2020, the ASEAN +3 country working group on student mobilities and quality assurance of higher education, or APTWG, came together to reflect upon the impact of COVID-19 crisis on the higher education sectors. A sharing of experiences among ASEAN +3 countries revealed that higher education institutions quickly pivoted to online learning and introduced blended, flipped, or hybrid learning models. Various types of support was extended to students in the form of loans and emergency financial assistance, tuition fee exemption, scholarship, daily health monitoring, and access to internet and digital devices. Virtual career fair as well as online entrepreneurship and reskilling programs were also organized for graduating students. The health and safety of our students, educators, and the communities, they form part of what has been paramount important to the ASEAN +3 countries since the start of the pandemic. As higher education institutions gradually reopen, a COVID-19 protocol were developed and enforced in line with guidance from the government. Going forward, the APTWG pledged to ensure the safe reopening of higher education institutions. In addition, the working group committed to maximize video conferencing tools and platform for teaching and learning. In an effort to address the staggering consequences of the pandemic on international student mobility, the working group resolved to explore student mobility programs suited to the new normal, particularly virtual mobilities. ASEAN post-2015 vision on education remains exceedingly relevant at this time. We must remain committed to the vision of an ASEAN education sector, which is people-centered, inclusive, and of high quality, fostering ASEAN awareness and helping ensure sustainable development. Prior to the outbreak of COVID-19, higher education has been a significant priority for ASEAN. In 2015, ASEAN leaders adopted the Kuala Lumpur Declaration on Higher Education, which recognizes the important role that higher education plays in ensuring the competitiveness of ASEAN and its sustained development. ASEAN leaders committed to uphold the quality of higher education and work toward increasing intra-ASEAN student mobility. Globally, Development Goal 4 of the Agenda 2030 on Sustainable Development seeks to attain equal access to higher education, ensure the provision of relevant skills for decent work, and honest education for sustainable development and global citizenship. Achieving ASEAN vision and goals related to higher education will need to become an even more important priority as we navigate the region post-pandemic future. Higher education should be a driving force toward building back better in the region post-COVID-19. Ladies and gentlemen, a recent rapid assessment of the pandemic's impacts on the ASEAN education sector highlighted the intervention required to address issues associated with educational quality, equity, and efficiencies. This intervention include boosting access to infrastructure, devices, and resources, tailoring teaching materials to disadvantaged students, providing support to vulnerable students and their families, introducing alternative modes of assessment, ensuring the relevance of curricula and programs to the changing demands of emerging industry, and more importantly, reimagining the future of work post-COVID-19. These interventions are certainly ambitious in terms of scales and scope. However, ASEAN is mobilizing all forms of resources and partnership in order to revitalize our education system and make them fit for purpose. The ASEAN Declaration on Human Resources Development for the Changing World of Work and its roadmap aim to cultivate a culture of lifelong learning and promote inclusive education through technology-enabled means. The roadmap comprises activity to digitally transform education in our region, with emphasis on promoting digital literacy and 21st century skills, digital infrastructure development, online platforms, and open educational resources. The ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, the region consolidated exit strategy from the COVID-19 crisis, identifies the promotion of 21st century skills and the strengthening of digital skills, digital literacy, and infrastructure among its key initiatives. Last but not least, the ASEAN Work Plan on Education 2021-2025 is currently being developed with guidance from the ASEAN senior officials meetings on education. A spirit of lifelong learning and also life-wide learning, we underpin the post-2020 work plan. The ASEAN senior official meeting on education is working to ensure that ASEAN education programming will be responsive to the needs and situation of all learners, especially the most disadvantaged one. For the next 5 years, high priority remains a strategic priority for the ASEAN education sectors. A dedicated outcome area in the work plan seeks to enhance regional capacities in higher education and work toward the harmonizations of ASEAN higher education. In addition, issue of student mobility and quality assurance in higher education will again feature prominently in the post-2020 education work plans. The fact that this webinar takes place amidst an unprecedented learning crisis indicates ASEAN and the Republic of Korea's untiring commitment to higher education. Let us regard this crisis as a unique opportunity to reimagine and transform higher education. Forging strong partnership and engaging diverse stakeholders going forward will be the key in this undertaking. I'd like to conclude my remark by expressing my deep appreciation to our key partners, the Korean Council for University Education and the AUN Secretariat. I commend your efforts, to bring together voices from government, from academia, from ASEAN entity, from students and young people. We need your voices in this conversation on how the higher educations in the ASEAN Korea region will rebound and emerge stronger with a renewed sense of resilience and solidarity. I trust that this webinar will provide a platform for a rewarding exchange of insights and experiences from this wide cross-section of important stakeholders in the ASEAN Korea higher education sectors. I wish this webinar every success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, His Excellency Kung Park. And thank you all the distinguished guests for opening remarks and welcoming remarks. And before we move on, we are going to have a group photo time. Speakers and panelists from ASEAN, please turn on the camera on your screen. And speakers from Korea, please make big smile on your face. Okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, one more time. 1, 2, 3. Okay, great. Thank you for your cooperation. Okay, now let's move on to the keynote session. Okay, in the keynote session, we invited 2 speakers from ASEAN and Korea. They will deliver the post-COVID-19 policies and strategies to respond to the pandemic in higher education. Okay, so let me introduce our first speaker, Professor Aldrin Darlak. He is the Commissioner of Commission on Higher Education, Philippines. Okay, Professor Darlak, are you ready? Professor, could you speak louder, please? Professor, sorry, but we cannot hear you well. could you speak again? We cannot hear you well. Okay,
Yes,
okay, good.
yes. Good afternoon, good day to everyone. Dr.Incheol Kim, the Chairperson, Korean Council for University Education. Dr. Choltis, Dhirathiti, Executive Director, ASEAN University Network. Mr. Choi Yoon-hee, Director General, International Cooperation Bureau. His Excellency Kung Po-wak, the Deputy Secretary General, and Ms. Mina Park, Director, Korean Council for University Education, as well as fellow keynote and session resource persons, students, faculty, higher education administrators, policymakers, and experts, government officials, and the rest of the viewing public tuned in via YouTube Live. Good afternoon, good day to everyone. Thank you for having me, and of course, the Philippine Department of Education, especially the ASEANSOM-ED Chair Undersecretary Jesus Mateo, for endorsing the invitation to the Commission. The United Nations calls the COVID-19 pandemic a human, economic, and social crisis. It has upended the lives of various segments of the population, with poor and vulnerable people bearing the brunt of the pandemic's health and economic impacts. Beginning March 2020, countries began imposing strict measures to curb the spread of the virus, such as strict quarantines, shutdown of schools and universities, and travel restrictions. The world remains cautious and vigilant, even as many restrictions are relaxed and vaccines carefully rolled out. In education, classes were canceled and moved online during the early months of the pandemic. The number of affected learners peaked at 1.4 billion in April 2020, which translates to more than 80% of enrolled students. Now, there are only 220 million learners affected by the pandemic, which is around 13% of total learners worldwide. Almost a year later, after the advent of the pandemic, and despite measures to mitigate its many negative impacts to higher education, this health crisis is still greatly affecting students' social life and learning, and has magnified educational inequality. These issues are not only short-term problems, they are foreseen to have long-term consequences. In the face of the emerging new normal, the Commission is committed to finding ways to make the Philippine higher education sector more responsive and relevant. We have been doing our best to reimagine our policies, regulations, and standards, and plan for our rewired higher education ecosystem responsive to existing national priorities as well as the new global order. At the onset, we encountered issues on mobility, financial dependence of international students, traditional student recruitment, face-to-face learning, and implementation of study abroad programs. Our efforts to address these began in February 2020 with the issuance of several advisories for the guidance of our stakeholders. We have the CHED Advisory Number 1, Series of 2020. Through this advisory, CHED encouraged its stakeholders to undertake information dissemination campaigns, maintain a safety and healthy campus, establish health guidelines and protocols, and provided advice on conducting school activities. It also announced travel restrictions based on the pronouncement of the national government. Second is the CHED Advisory Number 2, Series of 2020. All HEIs were encouraged to implement a protocol for screening and response based on the World Health Organization's guidelines. The advisory further announced the suspension of classes for all levels. Students and staff abroad were encouraged to reach out to the Philippines to facilitate their repatriation. Next is the CHED Advisory number 3 and number 4 series of 2020. Contained advice on adjustments in the academic calendar, deployment and use of alternative learning methods, graduation ceremonies, travel restrictions, and so on. We have CHED Advisory number 5 series of 2020 provided guidelines on class and training suspensions, local travel for those wishing to return to their hometowns, implementation of a work-from-home scheme for all employees, among others. We have CHED Advisory number 6, series of 2020, provided a more comprehensive set of guidelines for the adjustment of academic calendars and the use of distance education modes and alternative learning activities. And lastly, we have CHED Advisory number 7, series of 2020, which focus on HEI operations and working arrangements per quarantine classification, suspension of face-to-face classes, and eventual opening of classes. We at the Commission on Higher Education, or CHED, determined flexible learning, which combines different modes of delivery as the safest, most appropriate approach to ensure that learning continues and access is expanded as much as possible. We also realigned budgets to contribute to the national response to the pandemic and support our sectoral response to the health crisis. In September 2020, CHED issued the guidelines on the implementation of flexible learning, which serve to guide institutions by giving them flexible learning and teaching options, approaches, strategies, systems, pedagogies, and modalities. It also stipulates that institutions shall submit learning continuity plans detailing their transition framework and system for integrating flexible learning. It establishes the basis for requiring student and teacher engagement as feedback mechanism, determination of the learner-teacher level of technology to be used in program delivery, and it details and categorizes various modalities for the implementation of flexible learning. The Commission promotes alternative modes of delivery that can facilitate flexible learning. They can be full online, blended, and offline. Faculty trainings on flexible learning have been conducted to ensure that higher education institutions and their faculty will be able to adapt and resilient during these unprecedented times. As of November 2020, we have trained almost 190,000 faculty on the following areas: virtual classroom management, presentation making, learning facilitation, open and distance education, learning management systems, module design and development. We also have two landmark initiatives which go hand in hand: the PhilChed Connect and the CHED High-Ed Bayanihan. The former is an online platform storing higher education courses materials in various forms that can be used in teaching, learning, and research. Contributors can submit materials which, after review and approval, can be freely accessed by stakeholders. The latter is a virtual cooperative learning environment dedicated for training, capacity building, and resource sharing. In January 2021, the guidelines on the gradual reopening of the higher education institution campuses for limited face-to-face classes were released, which establishes the environment for cautious reopening of face-to-face classes in compliance with an extensive list of existing health protocols and policies. It prioritizes the fields of medicine, nursing, medical technology, physical therapy, midwifery, and public health in the application for reopening. It provides general and specific guidelines for face-to-face classes and highlights the use of flexible learning for HEIs ineligible or do not wish to apply for reopening. We have also partnered with local government units or LGUs in designating select state universities and colleges as quarantine facilities to help in the national fight against COVID-19. Another noteworthy development is the insertion of the 3 billion pesos budget for connectivity and smart campuses in fiscal year 2020 through Bayanihan Act 2. We most certainly pledge to do our best to provide medical and mental health support in recognition of how challenging this time is for everyone. On top of our foregoing major initiatives, we also continue to monitor the welfare of our students, faculty, and staff, provide assistance with repatriation if needed, host a wide range of virtual conferences and trainings, conduct surveys and consultation workshops, and continue to forge partnerships locally and abroad focused on building flexible learning capacities through digital transformation. It is our hope that with the help of our stakeholders and partners, we can continue to effectively address the challenges presented by this extraordinary crisis of our generation. Through strong cooperation, we are confident that we can ensure that our learners are guaranteed quality, accessible education despite the difficulties we are facing in the higher education sector. Again, I would like to congratulate the organizers of this webinar and hope for the success of your future virtual events. Good afternoon, have a good day, mabuhay po tayong lahat.
Thank you, Professor Darlak, for your presentation. Now, I'd like to introduce our second keynote speaker, Dr. Hong-Kyu Hwang. He is the Secretary General of the Korean Council for University Education. And he is going to deliver the policies from Republic of Korea to respond to the pandemic in higher education sector. Please welcome Secretary General Hwang.
Good afternoon. This is Hong-Kyu Hwang, Secretary General of the Korean Council for University Education. First of all, I would like to say thank you to all the people who attended. In 2020, the world was suffered from COVID-19. Universities had no choice but to teach online classes all year round. University professors and authorities were in chaos. When we first faced this situation, Korean Ministry of Education and KCUE organized a task force to respond. We continued to cooperate to overcome this crisis. We made guidelines, regulations, and directions step by step. Of course, there must have been a lot of shortages at the education side. However, through this presentation today, I would like to introduce the policies that the Korean government has pursued to overcome this situation. The Korean Ministry of Education and the KCUE responded immediately to the pandemic situation. In February, the Minister of Education and the university presidents gathered, and we discussed to respond to the crisis faced by the university education. Through this, the government urgently created and distributed guidelines for universities to respond to emergencies. I'll explain the guidelines. First, the number of school days. In Korea, the number of school days is set and operated according to the Higher Education Act. However, through the guidelines, we urgently relaxed the regulations. The school days, which was more than 30 weeks each school year, can be reduced to within 2 weeks of each school year by the university's regulation. In addition, the number of classes per subject is set and operated so that the required completion time per grade, which was at least 15 hours per semester, is not affected. In addition, if international students are unable to enter Korea due to infection, they will be allowed to take a leave of absence. Many universities are banning their first semester off. However, even if it is the first semester, students were allowed to take a leave of absence. Universities support students to continue their study. Also, the school regulations release the restriction on the period of absence of students to minimize disadvantages caused by infectious disease. Second, evaluation. We encourage the university to introduce various methods of students' evaluation. In particular, it was suggested to operate the evaluation according to the characteristics of the subject. Also, when taking an online exam, the universities had to provide with a detailed plan to prevent cheating. Third, strengthening communication with the students. The university should actively guide all students by using various methods for changes in the operation, including the opening day. In particular, the entire enrolled students should be informed about the disease, infection prevention rules, and behavioral tips for infectious disease. Also, contact information in the university should be announced. The guideline encourages university to establish a communication channel with the students and other members of the school. Major decisions on the university operation shall be on sufficient information and internal opinion. In addition, the school counseling center was recommended to set up. It was to help students in case of counseling was needed due to psychological problems. It has been reported that many students have experienced psychological anxiety and depression due to COVID-19. Not only students' physical safety, but also psychological support is very important. Lastly, it is about international students. Last year, it was very dangerous to cross borders. Therefore, international students suffered from immigration. In consideration of this, each university actively introduced remote classes. Also, the limit on the number of credits for the next semester has been eased. In addition, we have guaranteed the next semester for subjects requiring face-to-face classes such as experiments and practice. Through this, we would like to prevent disadvantages of studying abroad. Let me tell you about the quarantine management of international students. In early February, the Korean Ministry of Education secured national budget for international students, and the KCUE supported the university to operate the incoming students' quarantine. International students were placed in dormitories or self-quarantine for 14 days after entering Korea under monitoring of university. The KCUE supported the labor costs of field personnel to manage and monitor them. We also provided budget for the purchase of masks, hand sanitizers, and thermometers for quarantine purposes. This strengthened the quarantine of schools as well as the safety of international students. After entering into Korea, students were asked to install a self-diagnosis application on their cell phones and were frequently monitored. We also operated information booths at the airport arrival hall. When students moved to college, special transportation buses were operated to prevent students from being infected. This picture shows delivering goods to students under self-isolation and cleaning the dormitory. The university cooperates with various related agencies for quarantine. The effort to respond to COVID-19 was not just a temporary guideline. In the wake of the great transition of education, laws and institutions were reorganized. The Korean Ministry of Education has decided online education as a new normal. Therefore, in December 2020, the administrative notice of the Directive on the Operation of Remote Classes at Universities was issued. The reason for the enactment of this directive is to secure the quality of remote classes operated by universities. This is the main point of the directive. First, when operate remote classes at a university, the details are determined by school regulations. For example, classification and opening criteria for remote classes, operation of remote classes, completion criteria, acceptable credits, evaluation management. Second, the Remote Class Management Committee shall be organized and operated to determine and manage important matters, such as the distance education system and the operation of individual universities. Third, universities are requested to establish and operate remote education support center that supports the production of remote classes contents and the enhanced of faculty capabilities. As I said before, the quality of distance education is essential and should be guaranteed. The Online Classes Management Committee is responsible for the quality management and the deliberation of the class. The Online Classes Management Committee shall be comprised of faculty, students, and related experts. And the students members shall be at least 3/10 of the total number of members. After COVID-19, university education will undergo a big challenge. The direction and the speed of the change are endless. We now have to discuss this new future. But the important thing is that the Korean Ministry of Education regards the basics of education as face-to-face education. Based on face-to-face education, we will assist in various new education methods. Due to COVID-19, distance education has become a big part of our education. Therefore, we try to set up rules to support this well. After establishing these rules, we will guide the universities to implement them autonomously according to their situation. As such, the Korean government's policy direction for online education can be seen as two main ways. First, we will continue our efforts to secure the quality of distance education. Each university has established online education management committee to maintain the high quality of online lectures. Also, each university had to create online lecture support center. This center is to support the quality of the instructor's lecture. At the same time, the existing system has been flexible. Through this, we will improve the autonomy of universities. There are many legal restrictions before COVID-19, but we have lifted this restriction. The university made its own rules and imposed them autonomously. The university will be operated by its own rules and will further strengthen its capabilities. This will make our university education more advanced. I would like to take this opportunity to take a step forward due to COVID-19. This is the end of the presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Secretary General Hwang. Our two keynote speakers delivered the policy trends and guidelines in higher education sector to respond to the pandemic in ASEAN region and Korea. Thank you again. And before we move on, I'd like to introduce our participants' comment from YouTube. Let me see. A participant mentioned that it would be awesome to see greater collaborations among higher education institutions in ASEAN to promote learnings and learn from one another. All this can be made possible by technology. And thank you, dear participants. Okay, now let's move on to the session 1. Session 1 is focused on readjusting the university campus in a pandemic environment. For session 1, we invited 4 speakers, 2 speakers from ASEAN member states and another 2 speakers from Korea. And speakers from ASEAN and Korea will share the good practices from universities which was adapted to a pandemic environment. Now let me introduce our first speaker in session 1. Our first speaker is Dr. Dirathiti. She's the Assistant Vice Chancellor and Vice President for Global Affairs from University of Brunei Darussalam. Dr. Dirathiti is going to share the practices and methods to adapt to a new normal for campus lifestyle. Dr. Dirathiti, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Ms. Park.
Thank you.
I hope everyone can see this screen. Thank you, Ms. Park. And good afternoon and salam sejahtera to Dr. Incheol Kim, Chairperson, Korean Council for University Education, Dr. Choltis, Dhirathiti, Executive Director, ASEAN University Network, and also to our team in KCUE and AUN Secretariat, all the online participants from Korea and the ASEAN University as well. A good afternoon again. Today, I would like to bring a title on the adapting to a new normal for campus lifestyle. I'm Joyce Teo, the Vice President of Global Affairs from University Brunei Darussalam, UBD. And first of all, I would like to introduce everyone to bring back to about 11 months ago, UBD during the pandemic time. During the pandemic time last March, the COVID-19 pandemic in Brunei Darussalam is an evolving situation with extraordinary challenges for our staff and students. Although the campus remains open and the essential services continuously being provided, the university had to make sure that we make the adjustment during the unprecedented times. And this has been touched on by the previous speakers as well, especially the two keynote speakers have talked about it as well. And this is the time that we have to carefully strategize to ensure high quality experience for the students and staff. The university is also continuously reviewing the progress and the development of the online learning to look into the best way to support the delivery and achieving our online objectives. So during the COVID-19 response, within 3 days of the first positive COVID-19 case in the country, that was around the 12th of March, we had set all lectures and tutorials to be conducted online, though for minimizing the face-to-face and the big group interaction. On-campus student services were also reverted to online arrangement, especially the counter services. The drop box were put in places that to make sure we maintain the physical distancing and the social distancing. As you can see from the picture on the right-hand side of the screen, our Brew Health QR code and the temperature screening station were put in everywhere as well at each of the building to make sure that we only have a single entry points to allow the tracking of visitors. So that was a major change in the campus lifestyle. And the next one, what I would like to introduce here would be in accordance to the de-escalation plan of the nation, UBD, we also have several operational readiness level. So it started with the operational readiness level of the 0, which we briefly talked about just now, from the 12th March to 28th of May. We advanced into the operational readiness level 1 from the May 29 to 17 of June. To the level 2 from the June 18 to July the 6th. And there we move on to operational readiness level 3 from July 7 to 26 July. And from the effective from the 27th of July, which is also coincide with the opening of the last semester, from the 27th of July, we have advanced to the operational readiness level 4. So what do this one mean? I will go through very quickly here. So at the operational readiness level 0, which is from the March 12th to the 28th May, all the lectures and the tutorials have been transitioned to the online learning. And in fact, this is a very important strategy to make sure that we minimize the face-to-face interaction. It's not so much a concern or issue for UBD because we have been practicing the online and to the extent the blended for many years. But this is a good time for us to actually look into how to improvise on the pedagogy, the content as well. So during the operational readiness level 0, we had the online submission of the academic requirement, limited practical and clinical session. All the faculties and the centers are ensured that we want to make sure the attendance in the clinical practices as well as the lab, they were doing in the staggered and the cohorted manner. Our mobility program where students were abroad, they were recalled. And also, as I've mentioned before, with the effective online initiative, we have put Dropbox everywhere to ensure that if we were to give some of the papers or any students feedback from them, it will all, during the operational level 0, it will all done through the Dropboxes to make sure that that is contactless, which is very important at that very critical stage. From May 29 to July 17, we were at the operational readiness level 1. And this is the time that where face-to-face practical clinical session were allowed, but for the graduate students, particularly the graduate research students, faculties, institutes, and the centers ensure that the attendance in the particular teaching venue did not exceed 30% of the room capacity. Online exams at the end of the semester. As you can see also over here, that was that is a hotline for the UBD related matters, anything on the COVID-19, any of the public staff, students, they will be able to get their questions posed here so that we can give them the real-time advice. Under the operational readiness level 2, which we were from 18 June to the July the 6th, face-to-face lesson resumed. However, if you notice that I've highlighted on the screen here is we still did not resume on the online lecture. But however, the other part of the face-to-face lessons resume. The faculties were to maintain it now advanced to 40% of the room capacity. We had a picture over here, which are two of our international students. Adil, the gentleman, is the president of the International Student Club. During the time of the operational readiness level 0, 1, and 2, students, especially international students who were staying on the dorm, it will be very challenging to access the meal. So UBD provided the meal support, where the International Student Club also volunteered to help out to make sure that food are dropped in a way that we want to maintain that they are social distancing, and also as far as possible, the contactless. So international students did a very good job of volunteering as well at that time during the operational level 1, level 0, level 1, and level 2. So we were, in fact, at that time, we were about July the 6th advanced to the level 3. So at the level 3, which was July 6th to the 26th July, we resumed the face-to-face lesson and the practical clinical. Again, at this time, still online lecture. We had the limited ECA and social activities. However, sports complex at this time is still remain closed because it was a semester break during this time as well. So student attendance of the campus were very kept to the minimal. At the operational readiness level 4, which was effective from July 24th onwards, what we have practiced will be, we have the tutorial in person, but online very much, we still maintain it. The lecture still very much maintain it online. So it's a blended. So we have this, what in UBD, we call it the restructured blended learning mode, where all the lecturers will have to go through workshop to make sure their pedagogies are being polished up and improved and improvised, and every time. Skills upgrading points are also given to the professors who attended the workshop to upgrade in terms of the pedagogies. So at this time, students are allowed on the practicals on the laboratory discovery year activities, which is the 3rd year in our undergrad program. The discovery year is still very much limited to conduct in the country. So I have put a photo here as well, which actually the public, we had a whole nation approach. So the public were also very generous that to donate laptops to support the blended learning at UBD. This is some of the pictures that I would like to show, last few slides, where the UBD alumni, the donors, the general public, they help in supporting the online blended education of UBD, where in UBD actually it's not so much the students about not having the computer, maybe a small number, but generally would be some of them may not have the fixed broadband at home. So this donation will come in to buy the SIM card data pop up for these students so that they can continue their online learning without any issue. I would like to also take this opportunity to share, for example, our short-term program called Global Discovery Program. We have migrated it to be e-Global Discovery Program as well. So it's still progress at this time, where we also have UBD students to take part together with international students, but we converted it to the online. And we also encourage the students to come to UBD when travel borders open, where they can come in to enjoy another 2 modular credit of in-person classes of this Global Discovery Program. Now, I would like to share over here would be the pros and cons of the online teaching. We always know that, I think this is nothing new. We know about the pros is when it's digitally recorded and managed, and we can use it to and reused for improvement, and easy as well in terms of the flexible working time for both lecturers and students. However, one key thing I would like to bring up here is what has changed, as particularly the students, the campus lifestyle is, when you have the online teaching, you will find that it's a less person-to-person contact. And also the body language, they also means about the personality, how you can talk in person. So as a result, this is the part that UBD has emphasized on restructured blended learning. In fact, we did a very quick poll to ask a student. Many times in terms of working from home and the online learning, blended learning is about the lack of social interaction that they are concerned about. Therefore, it is very important during the COVID time, we support in terms of the online learning has to be student-centered. So at this particular time, that means it is a mix of the online and the face-to-face. But this blended learning, we want to make sure more activities and also the duration of the lecture. If you have a lecture that is 2 hours, impossible to make it into a virtual learning of 2 hours as well. So it's very important to take consideration of student feedback. Communication is very important. So last slide with everyone here is May the 4th be with everyone. I believe just many people will agree over here, the COVID-19 pandemic has pushed all the higher learning institutions to embrace the IR 4.0, Education 4.0, and University 4.0 much sooner than expected. So this is the time that I would like to end this thought. In fact, this is a thought, and I'm sure that it's something that we have been talking about. The COVID-19 time really have pushed us on the digital transformation. So it is very important that we can leverage on the IR 4.0 advanced technology to improve the process and enrich the student experience. The technology to transform the teaching and learning, the investment in the digital infrastructure and facility to make sure it's a collaborative digital workforce. And what is important that under this COVID situation, or in some countries, the post COVID situation will be, it is very important. We want to ensure that the key enabling technological know-how and the people skills must be connected, aligned, and future ready. I would like to end here. And if there are any questions, I'll be very happy to take later. So back to Ms. Park over here. Thank you. Ms. Park, I give the floor back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Teo Shoyan, for sharing the cases from University Brunei Darussalam. Now let me introduce our second speaker in session 1. Dr. Joyce Teo Shoyan, could you stop sharing the screen? Thank you. Okay, our second speaker is Professor Bae Sang-hoon from Sungkyunkwan University. He is the Vice President of Student Affairs, and he's going to share the student success strategy during the COVID-19 pandemic. And please welcome Professor Bae Sang-hoon.
Thank you for nice introduction. My name is Sang-hoon Bae. I'm so glad to have you all, although it is on screen, but we have to take this as a new normal. I'm so glad to share our experience. Before my presentation, Secretary General explained a national level guideline and policy, but my presentation is about what we have done at the institutional level. My institution is Seonggyungwan University. It is the oldest university. You can see our old building, which is established year 1398. So our institution is 223-year-old tradition. We're a private university. Our partnership with the Global Samsung, we can say we are #1 and private university in Korea. World ranking, as you can see, 101, 88, or 205. We have about 3,000 foreign students in our population. Well, student success is kind of vision of my institution. So we promote, we try to make our students succeed, not only in learning, but also in kind of career development. And we try to make our campus as a living learning community, not just dormitory, but we try to keep our campus as living and also learning. So this pyramid shows kind of student success framework. That's what we have done during the COVID-19 pandemic. You can see from the bottom to the top, so I will explain from bottom to the top. So first of all, this is very important to keep our campus safe. So as you all done, so we have done this, we try to keep the campus clean and safe from the notorious virus. So we have to clean the door, elevator, and many buildings. So we keep our students wear masks wherever they go. We try to stop COVID-19 at the door. As you can see the pictures, so we have a very strict visitor control. So you can see we have a demo machine in every single building to check body temperature, and then that sign, what can I say, QR code. So if something happened in the building, we can track who came and who went out, so we can trace. And then the right side, we try to enforce the policy of social distancing even when they enter the building. Yeah, social distancing is very, very important to prevent and to keep our campus safe. So in the library or classroom, every single student have to sit in the designated seat, and we have to some kind of block to prevent the spread of kind of, how can I say, the virus, that kind of thing. This is our campus dining room. So student and faculty and university community member have to eat alone, and our coffee shop is take-out only policy. So we try to keep students separate, people separate. This is the shuttle bus. When they hop on the shuttle bus, they have to check their body temperature, and also they have to check. We have a QR code, so who ride bus. And also we have a designated seat in the shuttle bus. It's very smart passenger management. Second, I would like to emphasize this thing, emotional support, or we can say psychological quarantine. And active communication is very, very important. Emotional support, I guess we call the 2020 freshmen as a class of COVID-19 because they never, visit, not never, but when they start their semester, they're not allowed to come to campus. So we try to promote some kind of sense of belonging and pride. So what we thought about is we try to keep their membership. So when you see in the picture in the middle, so we bought the box. In the box, we put in our HUTI and campus guideline and letter from president and letter from the president of student council and campus newspaper, mask. So we sent these boxes is almost 3,500. So when they get these boxes, they can feel they are member of SKKU. That is our strategy of emotional support. And cheer up SKKU campaign or rally. The picture is our vice president. So we can overcome this kind of very notorious era. So about I don't know exact number, but so many people participate in this kind of rally. We have a couple of confirmed cases. So they have to go to hospital, but we also have some population who met that confirmed cases. They have to stay at home at least 3 weeks. So they are mostly students. So how they can eat? So we decide to send some kind of food and water and probably ramen, their favorite food. So we sent them. When they got this box, they say, thank you. This is my institution, a kind of pride and sense of belonging. We have 3,000 foreign students. About 10,000 entered the Korean Peninsula. So we thought that they are very important part of our community members. But at that time, it is really, really difficult to get masks, even in Koreans. So we decide to send the masks and sanitizers and some kind of a toolkit. So luckily, we have a bunch of masks from donors. So we decide the mask to our foreign students. So on right side, this is a kind of chat. So among the Chinese students, they say Sungkyunkwan University is #1, something like that. Active communication is very, very important. My president already said, active communication and prompt feedback is very, very important. That is the picture where the president and university management met student council, and on the other side we have campus media, broadcasting, newspaper reporters. So we discussed how to overcome this period. Quick and transparent notice is really, really important. If we have confirmed cases, we have to make our students leave. Who are confirmed cases, where they visit, so they try to avoid visiting those places. Participatory decision making is also important in this kind of difficult time. So a president meet the student and campus media and any visitors when we decide the important policy at the campus. And campus media in real time, they send what have decided. And also, we really, take the advice from expertise. The picture is the doctors from Samsung Hospital, our sister hospital. So he is an infectious disease specialist. You can see the graph, first wave, second wave, third wave. In the beginning of last year, we didn't believe we have a third wave, but we had sort of wave. Finally, keep our student learn is, the most important one, even in this corona pandemic. This is our campus, empty. No student allowed to come, no student. So we really miss our student on campus or classroom. So we found on-tech learning is important this is a kind of new campus, new normal. So about 80% of classes were provided online, but some classes were face-to-face classes, such as a small size class or lab experiment or art. So we try to keep our regulation and policy from the government, kind of social distancing in the classroom. When you can see right side, so we keep, we keep our class and online. And also not only regular classes, we have many activities, extracurricular activities. You can see the pictures, our president gave prize to students on screen. That's a very funny thing. This is new happening. And right side, the faculty was encouraged to meet their students in small size, try to keep their students to feel they are a member of our community, the unstopped interaction. Quick response team. So we operate this quick response team. So they get any kind of feedback, question about download, access, or what is homework, something like that. So any kind of strategy to prevent cheating, something like that. They also get some questions from the faculty as well. Well, finally, this is our pride. We try to get data to promote learning in this new normal era. So data-based education quality management. So my one responsibility is to analyze the data. For example, when you can see the picture, how many access students have per week, by grade, by class type, something like that. So we analyze what kind of learning outcome from each class type, something like that. So a month ago, we hosted international workshop. The title was "How Can Data Support Student Success in Online Learning?" Well, this is the end of my presentation. So I'm very happy to share our experience so we can overcome this very difficult and dangerous time. Thanks for listening. Thank you. 끝났어요.
Thank you, Professor Bae, for your presentation. Now, I'd like to invite our third speaker, Professor Venki Shankararaman. Professor Shankararaman is the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Matters and Professor of Information Systems from Singapore Management University. Professor Shankararaman is going to share the practices readjusted the campus in a pandemic environment. Please welcome Professor Venki Shankararaman. Professor, are you ready to share your screen?
Yes. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to be presenting in this session to share experience from the Singapore Management University.
Professor, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could you share your screen, please?
Yes, I'm going to do that, yes.
Thank you.
So what I'm going to do is, number of speakers have highlighted a lot of different aspects of how we handle the pandemic in terms of, for example, ensuring campus safety, sanitation of campus, etc. But in my talk, I'm going to focus more on student pedagogy. So I'm going to talk about the concrete measures that we have taken at SMU over the last 1 year in terms of ensuring the continuity of student learning. And then what I'm going to do is the future outlook, the opportunities for pedagogical innovations, and what we have learned from this 1 year in terms of how we can actually use technology to enhance education. So that's what I'm going to focus in my talk. So just like the other speakers, in Singapore, the disease outbreak, different levels were introduced by the Ministry of Health, and in collaboration with the Ministry of Education, the first, when DORSCON Orange was announced on the 7th of February, in about 3 days, we actually had to move all classes with students enrollment of 50 and above. And then in a week's time, about 50% of all our courses we moved to online. Now, one important thing to note is the way we teach at SMU is we don't use separate lectures and tutorials. The students attend 3-hour sessions face-to-face, and in that 3-hour, we cover the lecture part as well as the tutorials, case discussions, etc. So everything happens in the 3 hours. So the first thing we did was to move the 50% of our undergraduate offerings online in about a 10 days time after DORSCON Orange was announced. And then the national circuit breaker or lockdown, as it's known in other countries, was introduced on the 7th of April. And then starting from 30th March itself, we had moved all instructions online. And so we are coming to the end of the terms. So there were 2 weeks left in the term, so all classes were online. And then the subsequent summer term, all classes were online. Now, an important learning point for us was, why we were able to do all this quite effectively is because at SMU and other universities in Singapore as well, we have been practicing, this emergency preparedness for the last 5-6 years, where all instructors have to attend a 3-hour training session. In our university, we were using WebEx as the online platform, and all instructors have been delivering a 45-minute session every year to practice delivering online. And similarly, the students also have been experiencing online learning every year. So that was very important. It's more, we focus this to get both our faculty and the students prepared just in case we have an emergency. And that's what happened last year. And we were able to quickly respond to it. And then what we did was before this, during February, March, we also offered refresher trainings to instructors, and about 140 instructors attended these refresher trainings as well. So we did, once the faculty start deliver classes, we wanted to get feedback from them. So here is a summary of what we have obtained. So in terms of the approach, the faculty wanted to teach as though it's face-to-face. They wanted to encourage participation through chat and polling, and then to use the teaching assistants to highlight important questions in the chat. Now, the main challenges the faculty faced were how do you facilitate active and spontaneous discussions, and how do you monitor student attention? So that was a challenge as well, because students can switch off the camera and we don't know whether they are really attending. Even if you're looking at their facial expression, it was difficult to gauge their level of understanding. So then we looked at what are the different tips on fostering online interactions. This was actually garnered from all the instructors who were teaching online. So the first one was being well prepared, and then to be early to resolve technical hiccups. Make sure to have every student's video on. So this became kind of the norm. Every student had to switch on the video during the class sessions. And then to divide the class into smaller segments so that there is focused attention from the students. So that's another, so I'm only highlighting the key ones. I've listed others, but due to time, constraint, I won't be able to go through every point here. And then we also asked instructors, how can SMU support them better? So first thing was WebEx was, people felt that it's not an ideal platform. So then we moved on to Zoom. They wanted support in video editing and setting up online quizzes, IT support to resolve connectivity issues, and also to provide emergency assistance. So based on this feedback, we actually implemented all what the instructors wanted. And from a student perspective, what they liked most was the pre-recorded lectures and podcasts ahead of the class so that they could watch it, get prepared for the class. And then they wanted the class to be more clarifying student questions. They wanted shorter online class durations and more breaks, and the use of different tools to enhance class participation like Kahoot, Google Clap, Google Docs, etc. And this is what the faculty were doing, and so they liked all this. And then in terms of improvements, they suggested that to combine pre-recorded slides with synchronous web sessions to increase the interaction and engagement. So already the faculty were, having highly interactive sessions, but the students wanted more. And so that's some input for us as we go forward. And then they wanted to have quiz to test understanding of content. As and when you divide the class into segments, and after each segment, they wanted a quiz to test the understanding for that segment. Between August and December period, so we learned a lot from the first February to July period. And so when we started our term in August, we had 3 options for instructors to choose from. Either they could do a fully online class, or they had a fully face-to-face class, depending on the number of students. Because if it's less than 25, we were able to accommodate them in the classroom with the required safe distancing measures as prescribed by the Ministry of Health. And then the hybrid was, we had if a class had 50 students, we had 25 of them in the classroom and the remaining 25 from learning from home. And every 2 weeks, they will switch. So the people who learn from home will come to class, and the people who are in class will go back learning online. We dedicated online teaching and learning. We developed a web page, and this page had all the resources who had done well, so the other instructors could learn from this. We different formats. We allowed the instructor to have 1 hour pre-recorded lecture and then to have 2 synchronous sessions instead of just having. We developed some tailored hands workshops, for example, redesigning face-to-face lesson into an effective online lesson. How do you do that? Facilitating effective online breakout sessions. So how this can be achieved. So we were training our instructors in these different areas. We provided support to help create digital resources, convert text materials to videos. We also conducted student workshops on online learning, because the students also need to know how to learn using the technology. And we also developed online resources for mental wellness, because that was also very important, that when students are learning from home, it's important that their mental well-being is taken care of. Then the other events, the final exam, we moved all exams to online. So that some of those exams were held on campus, but still they were online, because we did have a number of students who were stuck overseas who couldn't come to Singapore to take the exam. We achieved this using Lockdown Browser and Responders Monitor. These are tools that we used. And we also employed additional invigilators with technology skills for online exams. And also we allowed some instructors, if they wanted to convert exams, to take home assignments. In addition to, specifically with regard to learning and education, the other activities such as open house, we had a virtual open house, we had a virtual graduation career fair, and also a virtual freshman orientation. So we actually moved all events virtual. So the future outlook, the key, what we are doing now is to develop an integrated digital learning strategy that cuts across our undergraduate, postgraduate, as well as professional and executive education. We are not going to move all our courses online because we still believe that face-to-face interaction is very important. But what we are going to do is we're going to have more courses which will be delivered in a blended manner, which means there will be some online content, but there will be also face-to-face interaction. We are putting in technology as well as pedagogy resources into personalization of content, because that's one advantage of using technology. We can personalize the content for different students, and also personalization of feedback. We are developing a system where we have our graduate learning outcomes, and these learning outcomes are measured in the courses, and students will get feedback on their learning outcomes. And I see there is more scope for international collaboration in delivering online courses. So this is something I hope the ASEAN University Network will further pursue this, so we can collaborate and deliver online courses where we have faculty from 2 different universities in 2 different countries being able to deliver courses online to both their students as well as students from another university. We are also exploring suitability of virtual events as we go forward. And what we at SMU, all students have a graduate requirement that they should have global exposure, what we call a global experience. And now, because of the travel restriction, we offer this through virtual global experience. Overseas alumni deliver cultural experience. For example, we had an alumni in Vietnam who was able to deliver the cultural experience, actually take the students to go to different parts of a particular city in Vietnam, expose the students to the culture, and all this was done virtually, as well as food habits, etc. So that's the end of what I wanted to say. Thank you very much, and later I'll participate in the discussion sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shankararaman, for your presentation. Dear participants, if you have any comments or questions to speakers, please leave them on the YouTube chatting box. After the session 2, actually which is the student session, is over, let me bring them up to speaker students to answer. Okay, now let me invite our 4th speaker in session 1. Our last speaker in session 1 is Professor Chung Jin-seop. He is the Dean of Office of International Service from Chungbuk National University. Professor Chung is going to deliver online learning and exam regulations in Chungbuk National University. Professor Chung, are you ready?
Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to make a presentation in front of very honorable people. I'm Dr. Chung Jin-seop. I'm Dean of Office of International Service from Chungbuk National University. The title of my presentation is Online Learning and Examination Regulations in Korea. The content is as follows, consists of the 6 chapters. The first is the overview of CBNU, Chungbuk National University. Chapter 2 is academic course before pandemic. Chapter 3 is support and different types of academic course. Chapter 4 is online learning. 5 is examination. Finally, I will suggest some conclusion and future strategies. First, I will show some overview of CBNU. Is many university headquarters and faculties, academies, especially our member of students is about 22,000 about, and about number of faculty and staff members about 2,000. And there are 442 international students. When we confront with the pandemic, we swiftly organized the new headquarters, COVID-19 emergency response headquarters. Every Monday, we gather together and we are discuss about how to overcome this pandemic. And at first, there was a headquarters and many make some academic management TF team and academic support department. And before that, besides, we make some computer and information center and creative integration Minister of Education and college remote class operator support team. Below, there are many colleges. Therefore, I think the organization is important, and our first advantage is we are speedily, agility, make this kind of organization. Before the pandemic, we have three academic course, core course, and elective course, and open cyber university course. And all students should complete their core course as well as elective course. And especially international students needed to obtain at least level 4 in Korea language proficiency test. And CBNU OIS, Office of International Service, I'm Dean of OIS. OIS provide Korean as a foreign language course as well as topic course every semester. And this feature is very important because we are focused how to get to the most out of remote learning, how to manage a remote class, how to prepare our remote classes. First, real-time streaming lecture using Zoom, Google Classroom, and KakaoTalk. And then second is the upload professor-generated lecture video content. And then is the remote class using the online communities. As I talked, we established of COVID-19 emergency response headquarters and TF team for academic support. And then we are recruit special researchers who are very special in making remote class, and we are select some students to support the production of content. And next is the manage remote class. We are analyze all program of real time and then select some tools such as Google Class, such as eCampus. And we are purchase Blackboard solution inside the eCampus. eCampus LMS. LMS means Learning Management System. And we have some content-loaded lecture, PPT lecture, lecture video, etc. And lessons using online communities. And to prepare to make remote classes, we have some support TF team. TF team consists of 4 faculty members and 3 staffs. And production support of remote class content. And as I talked, we are hired 2 special researchers and utilize professionals who are required for the program testing, research methodology, and operation of remote class program. It is the just one picture to can explain how to we support and different types of academic course. First is the emergency response system. Second is the TF team, and 3 is the researchers of remote content production. 4 is resolving complaint about 1-to-1 remote class. We are trying to upgrade our remote class. Therefore, every month, every week, we are make some satisfaction survey for the remote class based on the student. And 6 is the creating online content. content is generated by a professor or some professionals. And it can be explained about the PESD, political, economic, social, and technical. It's very similar explain about, however, I briefly explain. Politically, we are quick response and establish the emergency response system. For example, is academic support TF team and headquarters, and we are make a self-diagnosis of health status through the mobile apps. Therefore, in case of Chungbuk National University students, they can diagnosis for themselves. And economically, we are hire recruit some researchers, and then we are purchase the Blackboard solution for the e-campus. We make a new e-campus for the student. Socially, we are use the KakaoTalk and Google Class and Zoom, and then from time to time we make a class satisfaction assessment for students, and then special support for the remote class for the disabled students. Already, the other university talked about that. Technically, we are support for the lecture and establish a new website for the supporting remote class. And sometimes we are lent something, equipment rental for video conferring to professors. Individually, rental, yeah. Anyway, next I will show some online learning examples. First is the Google Classroom. The text and real-time lecture are conducted through community messenger. And middle picture is the CBNU eCampus. Our university has a new eCampus, and online community class hours are checked and operated at a certain time. Therefore, we can use it very easily and useful for student and professor. Next is the broadcasting by Africa TV. The discussion is possible and quiz is possible using this community media. And it is a Zoom solution for real-time video lecture. It's a light fixture. You can show light fixture, the professor, and some screen. Enhancing the effectiveness of the remote class allow professor to check the students' appearance through webcam in real time and share the professor's computer screen. And especially it is very useful to examination to prevent the cheating. The next is eCampus LMS, Learning Management System. This picture show our eCampus, and especially professors should create lecture video and voice over slide on the platform. Especially attendance and download is very easy. And sometimes we are very focused on the copyright protection. The eCampus pop-up window prevents illegal use of class material as it provides copyright protection. And this figure shows the Google Classroom. And many professors or many students love to use this kind of the Google Classroom. And online lecture and submission of assignment and learner feedback is very easy between the instructor and learners. The right figure shows the Africa TV and eCampus. It's very similar. Next is a remote online class using the KakaoTalk online community. KakaoTalk is a very familiar to instructor and student in Korea. Real-time text lecture, voice file transmission, and reception method are used. And discussion between the community lecturers, student, and lecturers should give students some time to solve quiz. And an examination and scoring method. Due to the online teaching, and midterm and final examination are mainly conducted by a report, and we are evaluated based on the quality of the report. However, some professors give a face-to-face examination, but not group examination. Therefore, several classrooms are used at the same time to conduct the examination. And the implementation of the final test by remote method, the very important thing is to prevent cheating on examination. For example, the randomized examination for a remote teaching environment. Sometimes we are very short queues. For example, the 30 problem, just 30 minutes. Anyway, the examination more scary to student and professor. This figure shows the conclusion and future strategy. I'm a business strategy professor, therefore I use the ABCD model. ABCD model means some explain about how to succeed the business, and I will explain how to succeed in pandemic situation. A means the agility, B is the benchmarking, C is convergence, D is dedication. At first, Chungbuk National University conducted the emergency response very fast. Therefore, we are established COVID-19 emergency response headquarters very early. Speed, but not just the speed, but also precision is very important. Next is benchmarking. We are trying to benchmarking very successful university and internal, domestic and international countermeasures. And not just the benchmarking, but also we are trying to make best practice. We make our COVID-19 self-diagnosis app for students, therefore it is very convenient. Next is convergence. We try to combination of various untagged education support, Zoom, Google, eCampus, KakaoTalk, and it's possible, but how to easily, how to useful for professor and student. And we try to focus on the interesting of a student. Improving students' learning interest and learning skill through the various and interesting untagged education method is very important. Finally, our goal is the clear and actionable guidance, and early dedication and controllable COVID-19 on campus is very important. Therefore, we always try to do our best to this goal. And the challenges of remote final examination, we are tries to use real-time video program or open book examination and report and portfolio, or using random test method on CBNU eCampus. Anyway, we think that the use of technology in learning and teaching is very important. It is must. In addition to the basic understand, the student should be able to understand and use the LMS. Therefore, some students has the ability to deal with it. We can support, we can help students learning. And lecturers should understand and the purpose and intention of a blended learning system, as well as an online teaching tool. And learners also need to develop their friendly content, user-friendly content. And we are trying to understand the student's level, student readiness level. And in the era of distance education, students' learning is as important as teaching of professors. And professors should know and use methods to elicit and reinforce learning motivation. And finally, I will suggest four things the university authorities should support. Four things. First is the invest intensively in establishing advanced conditions for online education, hardware and software and wireless network construction studio, etc. Second, university authority should provide a digital device to vulnerable students. Therefore, not just fundraising, but also some system and how to help them, they can deal with the device. Third is organize the internal structure of campus space and facilities appropriate for online education. And finally, university should jointly establish online education support center at the regional level. Therefore, some university can share the support center. And I will just briefly show our appendix body temperature measurement in every entrance, and guest book in the entrance, the QR code on right, personal information. And as I talked, it's a self-diagnosis app like this one. And using the cell phone, we can diagnose our statute, students' statute. And it's entrance and exit on campus. And at the canteen, we installed a partition to prevent the spread of coronavirus. And in the library also force the visitors to sit at a distance. And I think the Toynbee said the history is the challenge and the response against it. And opportunity must be hidden in chance. Thank you for your long attention.
Thank you for sharing the cases from Chungbuk National University, Professor Jung. Okay, now it's time to move on to session 2. In session 2, we are going to listen to international students' experience in learning activities amidst COVID-19 pandemic. I think all the international students has experienced various difficulties in their studies. Therefore, it must be very valuable to listen to and share students' experiences and thoughts on the online learning and their experiences. So we invited 3 international students. They are going to share their recent learning experiences and educational expectations in the current and post-pandemic environment. Our first invited student is Ms. Stella Ann Chew-Min-Hui. She's the undergraduate student in Malaysia and a member of the ASEAN University Student Network, as known as AUSN. Okay, let's listen to her story. Hi, Stella.
Greetings, or as we say in Malaysia, Salam Sejahtera. My name is Stella Ann Chew-Min-Hui, and I'm a third-year philosophy, law, and business undergraduate. My previous portfolios include being Vice Secretary for the English Debate Unit, being the Executive Committee Head of External Relations and Research and Development for Thinkers Society, as well as currently serving as Chief Editor of student organization Fly Malaysia and Senior Associate of the Secretarial Division of the ICMS, or the International Council of Malaysian Scholars and Associates. Since the pandemic began in March 2020, our teaching and learning methods have been adapted to the new normal. These include learning online or through remote learning. For example, certain classes will be conducted through platforms like Cisco WebEx or Google Hangout, as well as the increased use of the university's online portal to access notes, assignments, and upload these files. Addressing the second issue regarding how the changes have been implemented to teaching and learning methods, I'll be looking at this through 3 levels. First level being the changes to the online teaching and learning. Second being the changes to the assessment of students by their lecturers. And third being universities and how they are planning for the return of students in the upcoming semesters. Looking at the first level, which is changes that can be seen in the teaching and learning methods, we can see that there is increased use of platforms such as Google Meet, Zoom, as well as Cisco WebEx. For example, there is also an additional increase in the use of the online portal and the use of electronic resources such as ebooks and videos. Looking at the second level, we can see that certain assessments have been transformed into 100% coursework, or their final exams replaced with take-home examinations or additional coursework. Another notable thing is that some universities have given the students the option of choosing their grading method. Grading method is traditionally CGPA pointer, but in certain cases, or for the 2 semesters that have been already conducted and completed, the students were given the choice to opt for a pass-fail grading method as opposed to the traditional CGPA method. As for the third level, of which we'll look at this, is that majority of the universities have agreed to give preference or priority to students who are in their final year, to students who are undergoing practical or lab classes, and students who have issues with accessing internet from home. So looking at these changes, we'd like to answer the question of how these changes affected our personal learning and interpersonal life. Well, previously, when I did conduct some research on ASEAN students and their experiences, especially mental and physical well-being throughout online learning during the COVID-19 pandemic, a majority of these respondents stated that they experience conditions like eye strain, headache, and back pain at an increased frequency as opposed to when normal face-to-face classes were being held. Another thing is that they felt more stressful when it came to presentations because of the fact that internet connection would sometimes just drop out, and it would be very stressful for the group as well as for an individual situation. As for lecturers, they also mentioned that there is a challenge, especially when it came to marking or assessing papers online, and because of that, there seemed to be a lot of shift in the way that assignments were given to the students. A majority of us found it harder to work in groups because of the fact that group members had different levels of internet stability, as well as different levels of capability and resources at home. Sometimes some group members had to take on roles that require more technological literacy as opposed to other group members. Positive side, a majority of my peers felt that they became much better at navigating the web as well as looking through the e-resources that have been provided by the university's library. This also meant that they were more prepared to go through a lot of different search results to find the adequate or necessary materials that they wanted to use for their assignments, as opposed to when they had physical classes and would more likely be relying on physical hard copy books. In response to the question that asks for recommendations on how these measures should be changed, I'd like to bring up the fact about posting hard copies of assignments. Though this may ease the process of marking for the lecturers, we find that as a student, it is a bit of a burden to post the hard copy of an individual assignment along with a group assignment on different dates and repeatedly, especially with certain lockdown measures that make it harder for certain students to access the post office or even access printing services if they do not have a printer at home. To wrap it up, I'd like to leave you all with a tagline, FAN ASEAN. So FAN ASEAN is an acronym, and FAN stands for flexibility, accessibility, and needs. So I believe that these 3 things need to be kept in mind and regarded as the cornerstones of any future strategy for higher education institutions across ASEAN. We acknowledge that ASEAN is marked by a digital divide and that not every student has equal access to the internet and its resources. In FAN ASEAN, F stands for flexibility. So this refers to things like the duration of the lecture, the method of assessment, as well as how the students can participate throughout the lecture. A would stand for accessibility. This specifically refers to the resources that can be shared from a lecturer to a student or from students to other students. In particular, we may look at things like casual study chats instead of formal WhatsApp groups that specifically only share links. And N stands for needs. So when coming up with a future strategy or a future plan for any higher education institution, parties involved need to acknowledge the needs of everyone involved in that particular process. So for learning in a higher education institution, this does not only focus on students, but also on the lecturers and the support staff that are involved behind maintaining and upkeeping things like the online portal. I believe that with these three key themes in mind, any strategy, regardless of whether or not it is to promote hybrid learning, pure online learning, or even face-to-face learning, will ultimately be beneficial and will have the most positive impact on all parties involved. Together, let's fan the academic passion of ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your experience and introducing FAN ASEAN, Stella. Okay, our second invited student is Ms. Anjia Utami Dewi. She is a PhD course student studying in Korea. Okay, now let's listen to her story. Anjia?
Hello, my name is Natasha Sonia Siahaan. I'm from Indonesia.
Hello, I'm Minnie from Division of International Studies.
Hi everyone, my name is Tan Widong. I'm from Malaysia and I'm come here already for 2 years.
I arrived here on September 2nd, 2020, when the virus is still ongoing.
Actually, at first, I was a little worried because the coronavirus was still quite high in Korea when I arrived in here. Parents, especially my mother, she was very worried about me and she always asked me like, did you have to go to Korea in this situation during this pandemic? Is it okay? Is the university okay with your choices and everything and etc.? My mother always asked me that. And through this program, I learned many things, especially about Korean language and Korean culture.
Everything was so fine. The health officers and the immigration officers are so helpful. And then they do all their jobs very thoroughly. They check me thoroughly. And then everything was so fast. And I came here because they dropped me in the international dormitory to do my quarantine.
After arriving in Korea, I immediately underwent a 14-day quarantine period in a dormitory. And also the handling of the coronavirus from the university and also the government here was very good, so I become calmer than before. Actually, during quarantine period, I was a little bit bored, but thanks to the university who always gave us some like toys like puzzles and etc. So it doesn't really feel bored at all.
It's really good. Everything was pleasant. The room was clean and comfortable. And I had a really good experience during my quarantine.
we just keep staying in our room, and they give our 3 meals. They put in front of our door and knock the door, and we can just go out and take the food. Yeah, that's all. If we need anything, then we just tell the people in charge. Then the second day, they will put the things in front of our door.
Even though when I first arrived in Korea, all classes took place online for 1 semester, so I couldn't experience campus life directly. But now I have started studying as usual thanks to very good handling of the Korean government.
I think the university did a really good job in handling the virus. There are contact tracing in every buildings, and then all of the classes, or most of the classes, are shifted to online classes rather than offline classes. So I think it's good enough to prevent the virus.
I wish that Corona can pass through very fast, and other foreign students can come to Korea to play and study also, and to do the offline class every day.
Greetings from Seoul to all participants of Korea-ASEAN webinar, Responses from Higher Education to Global Pandemic in 2020, and to the Korean Council for University Education and ASEAN University Network as the host and co-host of this event. My name is Anggia Utamidewi from Indonesia. I'm a doctoral student majoring in education. This is my third year as an international doctoral student in Korea. And during the past year, I have been continuously taking my classes online due to the COVID-19 global pandemic. It is a great honor for me to be able to share my experience in learning as an international student in Korea amidst this unprecedented situation. In the beginning of the pandemic, I think the response from the Korean government was very timely, and it has been followed by the immediate responses from my university. After the postponement of the start of the spring semester in 2020, the university provided information on the regulation on the conduct of the classes, followed by technical guidelines for using the supporting learning tools such as Zoom. Under the new normal condition, the university also regulated a more flexible teaching, learning, and evaluation system, where the autonomy is given to instructors by considering which approach is the most suited with these diverse circumstances. As further responses, the university also provides students with mental health supports, such as counseling program, online gathering events, etc. The guideline for response to COVID-19 occurrence on campus is also given, together with the updated information on the confirmed cases and the measurements followed after. In the case of learning and teaching process, the satisfaction survey was also conducted in Korean to see whether the education service is delivered evenly within this pandemic. There are, of course, pros and cons of learning process due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As mostly mentioned by some researchers, time efficiency is the most beneficial point of online learning. Students and instructors do not have to consume a lot of time commuting. It also protects students and professors on the possibility of virus infection. However, within these disruptions, the other impacts such as psychological well-being, health deterioration, and lack of socialization also become issues under this pandemic education situation. The experience and satisfaction of every student would definitely differ from one to another. While some approaches, such as generation and personality differences, could explain this variation, there are several aspects that we should consider. The view on university education, learning preference, career aspiration, community engagement preference, the type of program between undergraduate and graduate program, also the nature of disciplines, such as from head science and science. Based on my experience, in the future, The most important thing to address from the government and university action is to ensure that the quality education could continually be maintained despite of the possibly prolonged pandemic. It also has to ensure that the other aspects of university education are fulfilled, such as the socialization among peers, relation with professors, the students' physical and mental well-being, and the soft skills development. For international students, it is crucial that universities provide enough comprehensive supports to ensure that the international students are not left behind due to the language and cultural barriers. Providing support for administrative procedure, especially in English, will be a simple yet very meaningful way to enhance the quality of international students' well-being in Korea. Thank you.
Okay, that's the voices from ASEAN students and Angia studying in Korea. Thank you very much. Okay, now I'd like to invite our third international student, Mr. E. Made Genta Pramana Sukma. He is an exchange student under ACTS program. Okay, let's listen to his story.
My name is Sophia.
My name is Ayata Murtasari.
My name is Genta.
A final year economics student from Indonesia.
I am a final year student from Indonesia.
I'm 21 years old and I'm from the Philippines. I'm currently a junior student majoring in communications. My exchange student journey started last spring semester, academic year 2019-2020, at a prestigious university in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And I chose this particular institution because I have heard so many great things about it. And not only it is the oldest and highest ranking Malaysian institution of higher education, but it is also among the top 100 universities around the world, and it offers a wide range of courses suited for my field of study.
In 2020, I joined one semester exchange program to University Kebangsaan Malaysia, and I took business administration supported by AUN Study Works. I chose UKM because it's exchange opportunity posted in my University International Relations Office website, and it is also one of the top 5 best universities in Southeast Asia. Although Malaysia and Indonesia have slightly the same culture due to same roots in Southeast Asia, I saw Malaysia as a beautiful multiracial country that has a lot of interesting things to offer.
I am majoring in fiscal administration from the class of 2017. Last year, I had the privilege to conduct an exchange program to the National University of Singapore for a semester, in which I earned a scholarship from AUN ACTS to support my study there. I chose NUS because it is the best university in Asia, and I'm very interested in the rich history of Singapore and its relationship with Indonesia, considering the two countries plays an important role in the region.
Before the nationwide lockdown, we were still able to experience the old-fashioned university life for roughly 3 weeks. And from the actual registration of courses to face-to-face learning setup and having get-togethers with the other students at the university, we all had a glimpse of what kind of learning setup there is in the university.
I arrived in Malaysia in early February 2020, and I began my study in offline class because COVID-19 cases in Malaysia back then were considered low.
I began my study in January, where COVID is not as widespread as it is now. That's why for the first half of the semester, classes were conducted offline as normal.
But then, around mid-March 2019, the government announced a nationwide lockdown. And physical classes were suspended indefinitely.
In middle of March, local government announced a national lockdown, or Malaysian known as Movement Control Order, or MCO. So online classes were conducted after that announcement.
From late February onwards, NUS began to switch its entire learning process to online and has implemented strict precautionary measures. However, we are still able to go outside, socialize, and basically live like normal. It is not until the 8th of April in which the Singaporean government decided to go on a complete lockdown.
The online classes last until my exchange program semester ended in mid of July. That being said, mostly I've experienced offline classes more during my exchange program in UK.
Fortunately, I did not experience any major problems during the pandemic. During the face-to-face classes, the only constraint that I had was semi-sprinting from one faculty to another because it was immediately my next class and the bus takes a while to arrive too. And it is such a large campus, but it was actually fun walking around to be familiarized with the university.
Right after the announcement of national lockdown, the online classes must be conducted, and I did not have such a big problems doing an online classes back then. At first, I was not get used to online learning, but slowly I could get used to it and catching up with the materials.
During the transition period from offline learning to online learning, everything went smoothly and NUS's infrastructure and manpower was more than ready to embrace these changes. I was not surprised as NUS really lives up to its name as the best university in Asia, not only in terms of academics, but also in terms of its management. As a result, I did not experience any difficulties whatsoever during my study there.
I have to say my host university handled the online learning and the overall situation quite well. They made sure that certain needs are provided to its constituents and assured us that no one is indeed left behind. The professors also made sure that the learning modules are accessible and very easy to understand and to follow. They also constantly reach out to their students to make sure that the course requirements are being met.
UCAM Residential College was also very helpful for any student, local and international students who still stay in the dorm. They accommodate every student with a free food 3 times a day and free monthly grocery needs. There was also a sterilization conducted in every dorm blocks for a certain period. My residential college also encouraged the students to report if there were any symptoms of COVID-19 showing.
During my exchange there, NUS and its professors are very understanding and facilitative towards exchangers, to an extent that they allowed them to go back to their home country, offered them a refund on their accommodations, and they will actually adjust the schedule of the classes to accommodate those who came from the other side of the planet.
I'm still hopeful that everything will be back to normal. My expectations for the exchange programs post-COVID-19 to the higher education will probably be to put everyone's safety to its utmost priority. While travel restrictions are easing now, may the institutions still assess the COVID-19 situation in their own countries before offering an exchange student opportunity for international students. Meanwhile, I think universities should grab the opportunity to offer competitive yet inclusive short-term programs remotely for the students to at least experience what it's like studying and learning outside their home universities.
I think there are a lot of work and precaution in order to let the exchange program still go on. First, the exchange program opportunities should be open to a country with capable and high quality of healthcare service and has a reliable, strict safety measure of COVID-19 protocols. And extra costs might be needed for students to enter the host countries, such as 14 days quarantine costs along with COVID-19 tests. So I think some financial assistance might be needed to ease the students' financial burden.
I believe exchange programs must go on even during and after the pandemic. However, both the host and guest university must improve their services and improve their precautionary measures if they are to attract more exchangers in the future. NUS is one of the best examples that many universities should learn from. Universities should provide incoming exchangers with a 14 days quarantine rule and implement a strict measures such as reporting your temperature on a daily basis, just like NUS did. Apart from that, universities should also give you the option for exchangers to conduct exchanges completely online from their home country or using a hybrid method.
Thank you for sharing your story, Genta and other students. Okay, this is the end of the session 2, and now we are going to have a short Q&A time. Many participants left their comments and questions to our speakers. So I'd like to invite all the speakers and students in session 1 and 2 to answer the questions from the YouTube. Okay, let me check the questions and comments. Okay, first question goes to Dr. Joyce Chil-Seo-Yeon. The first question is, what are your suggestions for higher education institutions to ensure assessment integrity during this online environment? Dr. Joyce?
Yes, Ms. Park. Thank you for the question. Can I answer now?
Please.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Park. Thank you for the questions that is shared in the YouTube stream as well. I believe to answer this question, the most important here would be the trust. So it's not easy in terms of the assessment integrity. I must say that at UBD, about 75% of our assessment is now converted to the coursework assessment. However, we still have the 25% that is particularly involving the clinical and the practical lab work that you still need them to be conducted in person. So one thing what we do here would be in terms of the online examination may not be easy because, for example, if I may share with the audience, when the students have the online examination, the lecturer, the professors have to see that a screen to see the student need to have two screens. So one is for him or her to write. Another one is to share that he or she is not opening up a book or is not doing any cheating during the examination. It's very tedious work. In fact, this will work, in my view, for smaller classes. And I may end this, in fact, by saying that I'm more concerned about the Zoom fatigue, because in this kind of the examination, if it is an hour, both professors and the students will be very tired. So I'm more concerned about the Zoom fatigue. Of course, equally, we take care and we want to emphasize on the assessment integrity. So I believe that this answered the question. And back to you, Ms. Park. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Joyce. Okay, our second question from the floor goes to Professor Bae Sang-hoon. The second question is, for health-related major, how would you suggest HEI to fulfill the needs to train hand skills and professionalism during pandemic? Professor Bae?
That's a really good question, and that's very challenging. Not just health-related major, but also physical and lab experiment as well. So in our case, we hired teaching assistants. So we brought them with faculty in the lab, and they show how to, conduct this kind of thing and record it and play. And students see that kind of video. But I have to confess that it is limited. But we add some kind of feedback interaction on online. So, but new normal is we have to make our campus on and up, on and up, on and up. So we cannot hold this kind of situation forever. So if situation is getting better, we will bring our student and on campus and do that kind of hands-on experience and skills. So, but the situation is worse. We have to play our pre-recorded video about the kind of experiment or show between faculty and teaching assistant. So I don't have a complete answer, but this is quite challenging to educators in all over the world, I think. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Bae. And other participants left some comments to all the speakers. Okay, let me introduce 2 comments. First one is, another aspect of higher education institution is extra co-curricular activities where students get their social skills as complementary values. And second comment is, would love to hear experience from other higher education institutions on variety of co-curricular activities that help students boost their social skills at the same time still retain the soul of co-curricular activities. Okay, thank you, participants. And okay, let me introduce another comment to our students, which is, achieving inclusive education can be very challenging in the new normal, especially for developing countries with slow technological advancement and difficult internet connectivity and or accessibility. Okay, thank you for your comments, participant. If time allows, later I will introduce more questions and or feedback to our speakers and our students. Okay, let me conclude the Q&A session now. And it's time to move on to our final session, session 3. The session 3 is discussion session. The topic is government and universities' additional efforts to prepare for post-COVID-19 and higher education. And our moderator for the discussion session is Dr. Lorenzo Garcia, who is Vice President for External Relations and Internationalization from Dhirathiti University, Philippines. And the Dr. Lorenzo Garcia will lead the discussion with our panelists, including speakers and our students. Okay, Dr. Lorenzo Garcia, are you ready?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. And I hope our panelists are ready for this session. These are questions that have been coming up based on the discussions that you gave in your previous presentations. So shall we begin? The pandemic has actually dramatically changed education with e-learning. So teaching is now undertaken remotely and delivered on digital platforms. Hence, online learning is more or less here to stay even after the pandemic. However, we've noticed that not all teachers have caught up with the changes in pedagogy. What strategies now can be employed to fully engage them and have them embrace the training program that we have all been rolling out actually. So not everyone's still on board on this. So to start out this discussion, can we please invite Ms. Babaran to come in and take the floor?
Thank you very much, Ms. Lauren. I hope I come across clearly. My audio is fine. So thank you. So indeed, the pandemic has literally turned our systems upside down and exposed so many weaknesses in our institutions, including in the education sector. And as you have pointed out, not everyone was able to catch up or adjust to the new normal. And considering that this will in the foreseeable future stay with us until everyone is safe from this COVID-19 pandemic. So let me just highlight that in order for ASEAN member states to have a coordinated action on this, including in the education sector, ASEAN collaborated with the Asia Foundation to do a rapid assessment of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on livelihoods in ASEAN. And it also looked into the impacts of COVID-19 on the education sector. Based on the estimates on this study, over 152 million students, learners in the ASEAN region have been affected by this pandemic. And member states have deployed a lot of strategies so far. Some of them can be considered as best practices or good practices in managing this pandemic. But in terms of what was put forward as a recommendation in order to allow, educators, teachers, and learners to get the hang of this new normal, it has been suggested that there has to be greater investment in remote learning, in capacity building, and in developing frameworks. Actually, more efforts are needed to support teachers in shaping the teaching and learning experiences. For example, how to use Zoom for online teaching, not just how to design and implement online teaching. Maybe you can imagine that a lot of our educators or teachers may not be as tech savvy as our younger generation, and therefore just operating these meeting platforms would require investing in their capacity development.
Yes.
Also, there has to be greater emphasis on teacher capacity building and pedagogical use of technology, the management of remote teaching and learning tasks, and the monitoring of teachers' own professional learning. So it's not just about, monitoring closely whether the students are doing their tasks, keeping up with their assignments and projects and not cheating, but also keeping tabs on how the teachers themselves are able to upgrade their professional learning. And also teachers also need to be better supported in terms of developing their psychosocial competencies to allow them not only to effectively support students, but also themselves during these times of crisis. Earlier on, we heard how this process can be so tiring, not only for the learners, but for the teachers as well. Another recommendation that was put forward by this study and concurred by the senior officials of the ASEAN education sector is there is a need to adopt a holistic approach towards remote learning to enhance equity, quality, and efficiency in the education and training sector. So this holistic system would have to look at national remote teaching and learning vision, having the necessary remote teaching and learning plans and policies, the complementary remote teaching and learning education policies, of course, access to technological infrastructure and resources, professional development for teachers. It's actually a long list of recommendations, but that just goes to say, what is the needed holistic approach at the national level in order for this, remote learning that will be staying with us for a longer time to ensure that, the learning outcomes are achieved and that we are reaching out not only to those that have the resources and the capability, the digital resources, but even to the disadvantaged ones, the marginalized, and of course to still ensure that at the end of the day, the labor market needs are addressed by or met by whatever is supplied by our education system. Sorry, just to wrap up. Some other recommendations is to develop a regional toolkit for high quality remote teaching and learning. So this is an assignment for ASEAN to work on, because this is something that we can share with ASEAN member states. And revise the competency framework for ASEAN teachers. And finally, to expand the virtual dialogue on shared challenges for teachers. Sorry for the lengthy discussion. Back to you.
I think you were assigned a very good post, because human resources is really up your alley. So thank you for that. It is very helpful. Now, we're talking about interventions that have been mentioned by quite a number of the speakers in terms of addressing the mental health problems of students. But, I noticed there was a gap here. What has been done to check on the well-being of administrators, faculty, and staff? I mean, you have administrators who provide leadership for all our institutions. Then you have, of course, the staff who do the day-to-day running of our institutions. And yet, we focus a lot on students and faculty. So what about the rest of them? So to start this off, can I invite Dr. Bay to start the discussion?
Thank you. I have to confess that I have a little think about our action toward administrator and staff, because I'm vice president for student affairs. But when I think the best way is to have them feel they are safe. That is, the best way. So we bought some kind of equipment like screen or mask or some screening device. And also we have a system of working at home. So we try to reduce the density in the office. So half of them stay at home, half of them work in the office. That kind of action provide some kind of feeling of safety. And also we have some confirmed cases of staff members. In that case, our president sent some kind message or letter. We are with you. We really hope you overcome this kind of problem. So, and sometimes we send kind of flowers. So the best way is feel them safe and feel our community really take care of each member. That is the best way, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bay. Can we ask Dr. Zhong now to provide his own inputs and take on this? Dr. Zhong?
Hello.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Thank you. That is a good question. During the pandemic, most focus is just the student, especially the well-being or physical well-being of the student. However, your question is about the faculty, administration, and staff. And I think, frankly speaking, our university, our institute does not think about that. However, I want to suggest my chairman and want to suggest that 4 suggestions for the well-being of staff or faculty. First is as a human being, university faculty or staff want to take a rest or a bonus to refresh them. And second is the benchmarking the successful institute. How do they overcome their step? Their step is not machinery. Therefore, we try to how to overcome. Third is we need to create a platform for the infrastructure, the technical platform and financial platform and advanced shared platform will be help the students learning and the administrator and faculty. And finally, I think it is the most important. It is necessary to instill the philosophy of life and the philosophy of a profession. The belief is more helpful to use the philosophy, religion, or neighborhood, love. Anything is possible. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Jong. Actually, the message basically is about inclusivity. No one gets left behind. Everyone is part of this. Okay. Now, students without reliable internet access or technology even struggle to participate in digital learning. So the question now is, what concrete measures can governments and educational institutions take to address this ongoing problem? So to start this off, can we have Dr. Joyce Teo begin the discussion?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Laurent. This is an excellent question. I've shown my presentation just now about the blended learning that we have now. It is an ongoing process. So in terms of I will put it down this way, in terms of the accessibility to the physical, the laptop is not an issue to the computer. Maybe one or two students may have the issue. So in our university, we are very quick and prompt during the March that we quickly lend the laptops to the students. And also we receive very good overwhelming actually from the public, from the companies, the stakeholder that also donated the laptop to the students, so which we are very grateful. But that come to the issues of the accessibility to internet, that may be a concern that faced by many universities as well. So similarly, we have these concerns. So what we do was, as we said, because we have this ongoing blended all the time. So what we do during these, especially between March and May last year, is we also receive some donations from UBD alumni and some donors from the stakeholder. We get the donations and we buy the SIM card, we bought the SIM card, and we also did the data top up. Some of the donations are in kind. So we quickly get the student to make sure that there was no interruptions to their online learning. Particularly the critical period will be during the operational readiness, level 0 and level 1. So we were very blessed that with the whole nation approach, the student did have a very smooth learning experience. Thank you, Dr. Ro. Thanks.
I think it's interesting because UBD is actually a national university. So there's a constant coordination with government, right?
Yes, we do. We are a public university. Brunei has 4 universities. We are the top and the most comprehensive university. So we work with the Ministry of the Education, with the Ministry of Health very closely during this COVID period. Yes.
Can we have Dr. Venki input? Okay, because this is SMU. It's one of the young, aggressive universities over in Singapore. Can we hear from you? You're our tech specialist on this panel, actually.
Thank you. So there are a number of things. One is, one, you're looking at the device the students have. So that's one part of it. So especially in Singapore, there were only very few students who didn't have the right kind of device. So for us, our IT services was able to provide those. It's not the laptop per se, it was more providing them with a camera or providing them with a wireless router. So these extra peripheral devices that they needed. Okay. The other aspect is the connectivity as well. Singapore, we are very lucky that we do have a very strong broadband network across Singapore. It's not, so it's very powerful in that sense. But the important thing was to educate students on techniques to enhance the strength of wireless reception within their home. Okay, so unless you're a technical expert, you may not know what you have to do because where you place these wireless routers, those are important. So that kind of education, the training we provide to our students to strengthen this wireless reception. But what I see for many countries in the region, it's important that the national broadband strategy takes into consideration the needs of schools and colleges going forward, because it is going to be, we will be doing more online And then we need to establish regulatory and legal frameworks so that it encourages investments in broadband networks. So that's important. The private players have to be on board. And then the network and services also should be affordable for students. Maybe, currently, if you see software vendors give special rates for students like Microsoft or any other software vendor or Google, they provide special rates, or laptop vendors, all of them provide special rates for students. So going forward, broadband as well, maybe special rates for students and teachers is something that need to be considered. And the policies also should promote greater equality in access. So that is important. Whether in some bigger countries you could be living in rural area, so those people shouldn't be left out, as well as across the different groups within the society. I think that's important. And also from a teacher perspective, we should also ensure that the teachers also have the necessary skills to make effective use of the internet resources that are available.
Thank you, Dr. Venki. Singapore has a distinction of having 4 underwater cables. So for such a small country, you have so much connectivity. That's why wherever you go in Singapore, there's always Wi-Fi or internet. Unfortunately, in some countries, that's not the case. Sometimes it's just one cable. And so everyone, all the providers are just on that one cable. So you're right. There has to be policy. Government really has to step in, because that's the only way, that we can move forward. Thank you for that. Okay. Now, given that online learning is now the new normal, how will the educational needs of students with disabilities be addressed? In the past year, we've been in a lot of webinars, and people keep on talking about students and, online learning. But there's been very little discussion about students with disabilities and challenges. In a recent webinar that I was in last year, it was a Korean professor actually who brought this up and posed the question that government should start, initiatives in helping students with disabilities, because there are no specially made or customized programs for them yet. So to answer this question, may I give the floor now to Dr. Vey.
Oh, thank you. This is a really important question.
Yes, you're in student affairs.
Yeah. What I want to emphasize is that, in some case, or some people think the money go to student with disability is cost. But we think it is not cost. It is educational investment and social responsibility. That is the most important thing. We don't want to take economic priority in this issue. And then specifically, we have 3 cases. First of all, when we ask our student with disability, what kind of course are you going to take this semester? And then we approach the faculty, what kind of textbook are you going to use? And then we turn that text into Braille book, Yeah. And then secondly, we bought some technical services we call Team Viewer, and also we hire shorthand typists for hearing problems. So they provide subtitle, because they usually hear, seeing mouth shape, but in this kind of screen, it is really difficult. So we hire someone, shorthand typist. They provide typist. And then finally, we match some peers mentoring, peer mentor. So they go to dorm or their home, and then psychologically support, emotional support, and also learning support. So this is our 3 ways we have conducted. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bay. Dr. Venki, can we hear from you?
Yes. Yeah, this is a very important topic as well. I think universities have taken a long time to address this, even just for face-to-face. And now as we move to online, it becomes even more important because we don't want those students to be left out. So I would say the first important thing is professional development and teacher or instructor support. I think they need to be aware of, if there are students with different abilities in the class and how they need to, how they can support them. And that's where we do have a diversity and integration group in our university, and they come into play. They work with the instructors, and we identify students who need special support in terms of whatever specific disability they may have. Okay, so training and preparing teachers is very important. When universities choose technologies, I think it's important they choose assistive technologies that support accessibility. Now you have a lot of features that are already available, like text to speech, literacy support tools, writing support tools, which is like speech to text tools, accessible screen readers. I think these are very important tools that help students with certain kind of disability. And also the teacher and the students need to be communicate with each other and be open about this, and then the teacher can provide better support. I think that's important. I also think in some cases, because if you're looking at somebody learning from home, family engagement is also important. You need to engage the parents if need be, because they need to be aware as well. So involve the family in the process where it's necessary. And then we need to look at also providing instructional strategies. What is the pedagogy that this faculty can adopt to support personalization? How do you, personalize some of the content that you deliver based on certain requirements of specific students? And for these, as I said, tools are available, and the question is, how do we effectively leverage tools? And I think it's necessary to practice empathy to accommodate different learning styles and needs. So that goes beyond pure physical disability. Also, learning styles could be different. And therefore, I think with technology, there is actually more scope that you can personalize the content and the way it's delivered. So this is something at SMU we are also exploring, because with new technologies like AI, it is possible to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Venki. The input on how to fine-tune teaching people with disabilities is beyond just the technical aspect, right? Thank you for that. Can I ask Ms. Babaran to provide an input on this? Because this is not just about, accessibility of online learning for students, but what if they have disabilities?
Thank you, Laureen. Unfortunately, for some reason, I cannot turn on my video. I don't know why. But anyway, I hope everyone can hear me well. I support what was already said by other panelists regarding the matter. What I can probably add more is that I think given the diversity of situations of countries in this region, it is very important to leverage on and maximize partnerships, not only as already mentioned with families, but I think more importantly with disabled people's organizations, or what we call DPOs. It's quite difficult reaching out to each and every individual student with a disability, right? But if we engage with disabled people's organizations who can clearly advocate for the needs of persons with disabilities or learners with disability, we may be able to, better craft our education policies or even institutional policies to ensure that what we are developing is really inclusive If I may just also share that, if I may just reiterate, that I have been saying since the earlier question, I focus on remote learning, not just online learning, because in some parts of some countries in ASEAN, there isn't even electricity in rural areas.
Yes.
So some of the good practices that our ASEAN member states have been doing, would be to roll out some delivery of learning through television, if that's available, or through radio, the traditional radio, or whatever is available and applicable in the area. So my message is not just focus our policy on online learning that is heavily dependent on development of broadband and bandwidth connectivity, but even other multimodal deliveries, because that's just where ASEAN member countries are. And while it is already in the pipeline that these countries would be investing in internet and its infrastructure, but that will probably take longer for some countries to achieve. It's good hearing from Singapore and Brunei, how quite fortunate they are in their current situation, but it's really not the case for some other ASEAN member states. So I think at this point, building on and leveraging partnerships, consulting disabled people's organizations and the private sector even, would be very instrumental.
Okay, thank you for that. It's a very good input because it tells us the perspective of ASEAN and how working together, can help us win this battle. Okay, and I like that part when you mentioned remote learning, not just online learning. That's true, because a lot of our countries have remote areas actually that we need to reach as far as education is concerned. Thank you for that. Now, the experience actually of a local student differs very much from that of an international student on campus. And this pandemic has just shown us how big the difference or the gap has actually become. So what can be done to address this situation now, the way that it's come out? So can we start this off with Dr. Jong?
It's a very good question. The international students is very different from domestic local students because the culture or language or distance from the hometown is very different. Therefore, I will think about something. First, I think we should give more financial support, like a scholarship, to the international student. In our university, we give more scholarship to the international students. Yesterday, my university's vice president talked to me why we should give more scholarship to the international student. At that time, my answer is this time is the COVID pandemic situation, and we should give more resource to them. It is more helpful, and it is a win-win game. Yeah. And second is I think they need some friends, neighborhood, and network to overcome this situation. And recently, we have a Halloween festival in OIS. However, even though the pandemic situation, therefore, we just get a very small group. And anyway, it is need of friends and activities. And another is that they need some school support, university support, such as a counselor or a club activity and cultural activity, even though there's some pandemic situation. Therefore, we try to, university authorities think about how to support them. Finally, anyway, we think about we live together, the philosophy, and take care together. It is this philosophy is needed to find and advance the joy of life, even in the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jong. Dr. Cho, can we have you next, please, for this?
Joyce?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Laurent. Thank you for raising such a very important question again. You have raised very good questions this afternoon. This is something very close to my heart. In terms of the gap, we see that in UBD, there is no so much of a gap between the international students and the local students during the pandemic time. So usually in UBD, we have a phrase that says that when the international students step into UBD main gate, they are our UBD students. So we treat everyone, I'm sure everyone, all the university will be having the same experience as well. But let me respond these in the threefold. Number one would be, no matter it is the international students or the local students, two key things are very important during the pandemic time. A is the communication channel, to make sure that they are constantly in the loop of the latest information of what is happening, and so that they feel safe, as what Professor Bay has also raised on this issue earlier on. And second is in terms of the standard operating procedures, the SOPs and guidelines. For example, we had 2 inbound students that come in. From the moment they apply for the applications to join UBD inbound up until they have completed the 2 weeks of isolation, we are always in the loop to make sure that they know which step to follow, so that they feel it is, they can feel that they are actually in the loop and being taken care of. So I would like to highlight on communication channel, the SOPs and the guideline in terms of the exchanges. The second one, the point that I would like to touch on is in terms of international students, a different kind of the experience. For example, we have a dual program that our Master of Public Policy and Management, where the international students happen to be in the US semester at that time. They've completed the UBD semester. They were in the US, but they couldn't get a flight to either fly to Brunei. These international students from Uganda, they are UBD students from Uganda, from Jordan, from Malaysia at that time. So what they need at that time is the support, like Professor Jung has said. So what UBD did was we make sure that we provide them with the allowance, and to make sure that they have no issue with the accommodation, with the visa as well when they were in the States. So I think this refers to international students, but not at our campus, but rather they are on a remote semester abroad at our partner university. And the third one is in terms of international students completed their semester and about to fly home, especially the exchange student. So we have allocated a specific international student unit to look after this group of students. So when they have completed their exchange program in UBD, we make sure that we liaise with the embassy. We make sure that there are flights for them to fly home. And because when they reach home, they will be required self-isolations of the 2 weeks, we make sure that the director and deputy director of the global relations in our office communicate with them so that they know that they are being taken care of. That is very, very important in our views, that when the student knew that they have specific guidelines to take care of them, they will feel more safe and they know where to go in the next stage. So we are very glad we are still in constant in touch with these international students on regular basis. We know that those have already gone home, they are safe, and they have already started a new journey of the new semester. And the third part is I saw the video and I'm very touched, especially with the feedback from Sophia, from Anita and Genta. They raised very important issues, like because of the COVID, how about short-term program? How about the virtual study abroad? So I think I would like to take this opportunity to share that as well. We actually face the same issue. In March, we were about to welcome a group of the students for our short-term program called Global Discovery Program, GDP. However, because of the COVID, they couldn't travel. And of course, because of the travel situation as well. So we immediately converted that into the eGDP. So it became a virtual program, which currently at the moment is still running as we speak. So our GDP coordinator probably cannot join the webinar this afternoon, despite she really would like to be keen to join because she is taking care of the virtual eGDP. And also to share with the international students, a potential international student to UBD. We also have the virtual program, not only short term, but also for the study abroad that we welcome you to join us. Well, and I enclosed my email earlier. Feel free to contact me at any point. Sorry that Dr. Lauren, I'm taking a bit more because this is a topic very close to my heart as I share. So back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. That was a very good input. So we look forward to you emailing us, inviting us to these events. Okay.
Thank you. Will do. Thank you.
I'd now like to invite the students for the input on this question because this directly affects them. So can we start off with Stella, please?
Thank you, Dr. Lauren. So I'll be speaking from the perspective of a domestic student or a local student having gone through 2 semesters during this pandemic. And I feel that one of the biggest parts that highlighted or caught my attention was the differences in shifting from one semester into the new semester. Yes. So in particular, for local students, it was more of an issue like, okay, we'll be going home soon, and then we just have to worry about the future semester, will our fees be returned? But for the international students, it was a lot about like, should we go home? Do we have to bear the financial expenses of getting a flight to go home? And then at the same time, their home country may have different travel restrictions than the host country, like for example, in my case, is Malaysia. And then there's another issue about visa application, as well as if in that particular case, because I mentioned earlier that universities change the grading option. So from CGPA to a pass-fail, if your results were, let's say, less than satisfactory, then they had to write another letter to explain the results and then review everything again with the vice chancellor of the university on campus. So I feel that in particular, it was, for me, the biggest worry wasn't immediately going into online learning or remote learning when the pandemic first broke out, but it was that shift from when the semester ended and when they wanted to begin the new semester. So a lot of students were wondering, should they defer their studies completely, stay at home for the next semester and then only continue when the situation has settled down? Or should we just go ahead and remain in this country that we're not really sure about whether or not they can go home at any period of time. So I think that's the main difference I saw between local and international students during the pandemic, that big gap of the second semester of the academic year of 2019-2020 and the first semester of academic year 2020 to 2021. So yeah, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. Can we hear from you, Genta?
Okay, thank you. I hope my voice is audible.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so thank you. I am speaking as a student from developing country that underwent a semester as an exchange student. So I am in a complete agreement with the Korean ministry that yes, governments and universities must provide more scholarship for students because as we all aware, we from the third world countries have lower purchasing power parity, and consequently everything in the first world countries are at least 3 times more expensive for us. So in addition, we do not have, tuition loan system, and we are literally competing against each other to earn a scholarship because without it, we basically cannot afford to go on exchange, let alone enroll in universities abroad. To put things into perspective here, for example, my experience in Singapore, there are only 3 students coming from Indonesia, while there are more than 1,000 students internationally, most of them coming from Europe and North America. So yes, economy is an important issue, but besides that, there is also an issue regarding socialization. According to a survey, students are actually keen to go back to university physically, but sure, learning is still ongoing with online. But universities are more than just a place for learning classes or degrees. It is a community. It is where we meet new people, we debate with people, and it is a journey towards self-discovery. And frankly speaking, it is quite hard to do so online. So with that being said, I hope that exchange programs and offline classes could go on even during and after the COVID pandemic. I'm in complete agreement with the policy guideline that has been formulated earlier. And hopefully in the future, universities must implement a hybrid learning system to ensure students from all walks of life could participate. Yeah. So for starters, I believe the key here is communication and inclusivity, starting from the macro level, i.e. the government, universities, to the micro level, such as campus administrators, professors, and student organizations. This is to ensure international students don't be left behind from the rest, because that is the worst feeling that, someone from foreign country studying in a foreign country being left alone. Mental health is also a critical issue, but unfortunately here in the developing country, it is still lacking attention. Disability assistance is also an important issue, not only in terms of physical disability, but technological disability as well. People in the developing countries often suffer from slow internet or even worse, lack of hardware. This applies not to only students, but to some extent, professors and university staffs as well. And also there is a matter of different time zones, especially for those who came from the other side of the world. For examples, back in Singapore, there are students from Sweden, and they decided to go back to their home country. And because of the different time zone, they have to conduct classes around 2 a.m. in the morning Sweden time. So, the university decided to reschedule the classes, the entire classes, to accommodate them. So that's very good. Also, I can confirm as a citizen from a developing country that even though I live near the city, in the suburbs, we still get slow internet sometimes. And especially during monsoon season, there are power outages once in a while. So that's, the problems we are facing currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Genta. Can we have Anggia? Hello, Anggia. Can you please turn on your speaker?
Okay, am I
Very good.
audible? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. So thank you for the question.
Experience with Genta and Stella
Because I'm not an exchange student, so I'm here in Korea, a long PhD course study. So I can see that from previous explanations that the experience of international students in the host countries would be different from one to another, which means under different contexts, they have different adaptation contexts as well. Therefore, Genta and Stella have already mentioned about the approach from university, how university should be able to support the specific needs of international students to especially ensure the physical and psychological well-being. I think that's very important, and making sure again they are not left behind, as you mentioned, and previous presenters also mentioned the inclusivity approach. And some actions have already mentioned before, providing guidelines from pre-arrival, post-arrival, and all COVID-19 related information, and also provision of like maybe special dedicated supervisor or mentor for international students is also important measurement, I think. But then aside that from university perspective, I think it's very important as well to see how the grassroots communication level, and then how the home country's government, in my case from Indonesia, let's say the embassy from Indonesia, provide enough support for international students, checking them up from time to time. And this could address the issue that Stella mentioned before about visa and immigration issues. I think it has raised a lot, and in this opportunity, I would like to raise my really deep appreciation, because the Embassy of Indonesia really take care of the well-being of Indonesian students. Mm-hmm. So when the first time the pandemic break out, like we are lacking a mask. So the masks were really like not available everywhere. And then the embassy provided us with enough masks until the mask is available again. And until now, even the ambassador itself gave us regular meetings with international students and give us the opportunity to address our concerns, what are the problems we are facing. So I think it's not just the job or the responsibility of university per se and the host government per se, but also the home country's government as well. And then also maybe the student association also play a very important role, making sure that we feel safe and feel at home, even though we are not at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Angya. That's very good because your embassy has been very active as well as your student organization actually. So the Indonesian students group are very active where you are. So that's good to hear. Okay, we go to our last question for the discussion now, which is about post-COVID-19. How can students from less developed economies catch up and flourish like their counterparts in first world countries? So may I direct this question to our students in the group. And can we have Angya start it off now? You're the last in the previous question, but can you go first now?
Okay, thank you. So this is a very important question, and because I'm majoring in education, I've discussed this a lot with my peers in the class. In the case of Korea, we don't have any issues of internet connection. Like Korea has the fastest internet connection in the world. So like thinking of like internet instability was never a problem for us actually. But then I reconsider myself as an Indonesian student. This is a very important issue to address as well. And in a more general context, I think it's very important to note that actually the COVID-19 education has been challenging for countries globally, especially for those who have been hit hard by the pandemic. So the thing is, we have no idea what will be the result of COVID-19 education. Even for the developed economies, we are not sure what are the results of this assessment after COVID-19 education. Are schools or university provided the same quality education? Are the graduates have the same skill, same experiences, and enough human capital development with this education? So I think by seeing flourishing more in the case of developed economies is not necessarily really an issue here, because even though we are developing our developed economies, we still have these issues. But then, of course, the digital divide and then the Mateo effects with different social economic background do exist. So on the more optimistic views, I believe that it is the time for developing economies to catch up, like making COVID-19 as a reset button to build back the education systems. Because in the case of developing economies, the education system is still being developing as well. So actually from developing economies point of view, we have the time to make it up, right? And then as we can see, one important thing from COVID-19 is technology can make anything better. We can access more knowledge, information, but then it's only possible when we have the access to technology. So I think the most important thing is for the national government, as Dr. Lorin mentioned also before, to put more investment on education, which is definitely needed to ensure that the supporting elements, the infrastructure, the technology to deliver the quality as education is provided. So as you mentioned, we don't have any other option, but then the national government effort to give more investment is really needed. In the case of Indonesian government, I think we provided, the government provided internet broadband, I think for the students for free, but then on certain limits, but that's not enough. And we still have to give more consistently. And the main homework again is, I think, to come up with a policy strategies to fill up the human capital loss due to the pandemic. And on the other side, maybe better collaboration with private counterparts, industry and international organizations. Community engagement is also a very important measure. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Angya. That was very, very, holistic in approach. Genta, can I have you go next, please?
Yes, thank you, Angia. Thank you, Laureen. I'm very passionate to discuss about the dynamics and disparity between first and third world countries. I argue that students alone will have a hard time catching up with their counterparts in first world countries even before COVID. Yeah, because according to research, Indonesia is, at least my country is, about 70 to 120 years behind first world countries. So if, for example, I'm 23, and if I wait for 70 years, I might probably be dead already because life expectancy is quite low as well here. So this is why scholarship and going exchange is important because uh, people out here tend to be stuck in their own bubble. Hence, it is paramount that we travel and expose ourselves to the world and experience other ways of living. Otherwise, we will always be stuck in our bubble, which we deem as the norm. This is what happened to me and is happening to all of my friends and colleagues. They did realize that there are better and well-off ways of living abroad, not until I began to share my exchange experience through social media. Therefore, exchange program must go on even during and after the pandemic. But I agree with Angia, this COVID pandemic really forced people, especially those who are less tech savvy, to become more tech savvy. Yes. And I am experiencing firsthand from my professors at universities. And also, I guess the second barriers to catching up with the first world is, I guess, there is a language barrier. Most, if not all, exchange and scholarship programs require a candidate to be already proficient in English or other languages, which is understandable reasons because they have to understand the language. But I argue this is quite counterintuitive, as one of the reasons students go on exchange is to actually improve their languages proficiency. So I also witnessed during my experience in Singapore that there are actually a lot of exchange students from non-English speaking first world countries such as France or Italy that are having a very hard time commanding English. So why the double standards? So even by a miracle that students from the developing countries could catch up with their first world counterparts, it will require a lot of efforts from the national level, especially from governments and universities. They must encourage and provide financial support for exchange programs or even full-blown bachelor, master's, or PhD programs abroad. Sure, this will be harder for the post-COVID world as the lower purchasing power of third world countries are even lowered by the pandemic and governments are facing budget cuts across the board. From the student itself, we must continue go out and venture the world as young adults, or else we will be accustomed to our own bubble and way of living. Because as we grow older, we obviously become more routine to just live the way we live our bubble, and provoking change is less likely to happen as we get older.
Thank you, Genta. You're challenging the different governments to set aside budgets for this. It's the only way you can close the gap, right? Yes. Okay. Last but not least, can we have Stella?
Thank you, Dr. Lorraine. So I'll keep my comments short. I think that what Genta and Angia mentioned is very true, and that there are a lot of difficulties that third world countries or developing economies face. But I do want to remind our listeners and the audience that something about developing economies is also inherently tied with culture. And I believe that ASEAN and the diversity of cultures in ASEAN is actually extremely valuable for the world moving forward. So recent research has proven that cultural intelligence is actually a key intelligence that can help determine performance in tasks. So this means that, like, for youths growing up in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, etc., we have this kind of like inherent treasure that we grow up in such a culturally diverse context that it is built into us, and we need to capitalize on this. Yes, we may face difficulties in the technological barrier. Yes, we may face difficulties in learning English and commanding it at a very proficient level fast, but we cannot forget that we have other advantages that we need to make use of. We can all see the power of culture from what Korea has brought to the world. So it is time for ASEAN to also step up and see that together we can bring ASEAN culture, and from that culture, build upon it and continue to capitalize on the human capital of ASEAN. So yes, as I mentioned earlier, I do believe that Fan ASEAN could be the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. I like that term she introduced, culture intelligence. We should remember that. Okay, let me attempt now to integrate the session that we've just had and just, cull from the most important points that were repeated, in the responses. First of all is the mention of technology. While it is important, it's basically an enabler. So we should never forget this. The focus of education must still be on the student. Next is the concept of inclusivity. It means no one gets left behind. So whether we're talking about faculty, students, staff, and even administrators, we should be developing programs to allow everyone to be on board on this new normal that we have in front of us. Then, our COVID aside, our shared history tells us that change is the one constant that will always be there. And so the new key responses we have seen in action in the past year are connectivity, flexibility, and adaptability. So like they say, you have to change to survive. And so this has been something that has been seen again and again in the different speeches that and discussions that have happened today. So thank you to our panelists for sharing their best practices and also the wonderful insights that they have given. Okay, not just in their respective speeches, but also in this discussion. It was very, very productive. So goodbye to all of you. Thank you for this session and have a good evening.
Thank you, Dr. Lauren, for your excellent moderation. And thank you all the panelists for your insightful opinions. Okay, let me introduce some comments uploaded during the discussion session very briefly. Okay, the comments to all the panelists. The first comment is that we feel that teaching students from health major without a chance to do practical or clinical placement is like teaching pilot to fly the planes through Zoom. It is daunting. At the same time, we still could not predict when the pandemic will end. Okay, and the second comment is that it is too easy to list all things we've done to maintain students' well-being, but it is difficult to mention even one aiming at lecturers and staff. Okay, that's very important opinions. Thank you for participants for your valuable comments. Okay, it's time's running off so fast, and it's now time to conclude the webinar. Okay, for now, for closing remarks, I would like to invite two guests from Korea and ASEAN. And first, from Korea side, please kindly allow me to deliver closing remark on behalf of Chairman Kim. Okay, let me start. First of all, I would like to deliver my sincere gratitude to all the participants, distinguished guests, speakers, and students who shared various responses and experiences at government level, university level, and student level. And also, I would like to thank all the staff from AUN, ACTF, and KCUE to prepare for the successful webinar today. As we all know, COVID-19 is like a sudden disaster, but we all have gathered together to overcome this situation and to secure the quality of education and protect rights to study of students. And dear participants, I really appreciate your active participation and enthusiasm. And KCUE believes that this kind of webinar to share international perspectives and practices is more than important. As a representative organization for universities in Korea, we will keep talking and cooperating with our international colleagues, including ASEAN organizations. And once again, thank you very much for your active participation and opinions today. Okay, this is my closing remark on behalf of Chairman Kim. Okay, now I'd like to invite Dr. Choltis Dhirathiti for closing remark from ASEAN side.
Thank you very much. Thank you also to Chairman Kim. On behalf of the ASEAN University Network, the entire network, I should like to express my appreciation to all of the panelists, speakers, and also our wonderful moderator, Dr. Loren. Thank you so much for your energy, your inputs, and what a wonderful flow of information and exchanges that we receive today. I'm sure that this webinar will not just end here or today or end now. It will continue with those flow of information and inputs you kindly given us today. Lastly, I should like to say how grateful I am to the Korea Council to University Education, or KCUE, KQ, we call it KQ, the main host, and to the Secretariat of the AUNACTS, the co-host, for the wonderful organization of this event. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Choltis, for your wonderful closing remark. Okay, well, this is the end of the webinar on the responses from higher education to global pandemic in 2020 among ASEAN and Korea. The recorded video of this webinar will be uploaded to AUN YouTube channel here and KCUE's YouTube channel, which is called 대학 어디가 TV, in a few days. Please check the video later. And I hope all the participants have restful and healthy evening. And thank you, everyone, and thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Stay safe.
Thank you so much.